Close your eyes and imagine the world before memory was written in books. Stories moved like whispers through firelight, carrying fragments of things too strange to be explained, too persistent to be dismissed. We call them myths, but myths have a way of surviving because something inside them might be true. Perhaps they are echoes of forgotten civilizations, glimpses of ancient disasters, or distorted accounts of real encounters. Tonight you will drift into that blurred place where imagination and reality merge, and where the line between dream and history quietly disappears. Deep in the forests where rivers turn the world into mirrors of green and gold, there is a story that refuses to die. The Spanish called it El Dorado, the Golden One. At first it was not a city, not a kingdom, but a man. A king said to cover himself in powdered gold and bathe in a sacred lake, shimmering like the sun itself before sinking beneath the waters. Later, the myth grew. It became not a man, but a city. Then it became an empire, walls made of gold, temples gleaming brighter than daylight, treasures stacked beyond imagination. With each retelling, the hunger for discovery grew. Yet the deeper explorers went into the jungles of South America, the more the city seemed to retreat into mist, always just beyond reach, like a dream you can almost remember but never hold. The conquistadors believed it. They crossed oceans, braved swamps, starved in the wilderness, and fought each other with feverish madness, all for the promise of a city that may never have existed. Men like Gonzalo Pizarro, Francisco de Orellana, and Sir Walter Raleigh staked their lives, their reputations, their sanity on the hunt for El Dorado. Hundreds died of disease, thirst, hunger, and betrayal, their bones left to vanish under vines and roots. Yet the myth of El Dorado endured, more powerful than death. The strange truth is this: the harder it was to find, the more real it became in the minds of those who searched for it. And still, beneath the exaggeration, there are whispers of something true. Archaeology reveals vast pre-Columbian civilizations in the Amazon, their ruins scattered under jungle canopy, hidden until modern technology uncovered their patterns. Geoglyphs, roads and cities that once thrived, now lie forgotten. The land without people imagined by Europeans was in fact a place of complexity, trade and artistry. Diseases brought by colonists decimated entire cultures before they could be understood. Could El Dorado have been not a single golden city, but the memory of these civilizations rich not only in gold but in knowledge, agriculture, and sacred ritual? Lake Guatavita, in Colombia, still bears the echo of the Golden King. Indigenous rituals involved offerings to the gods. Gold dust scattered into water, treasures dropped into the depths as gifts, not wealth. Spanish greed misunderstood this practice. To them, such devotion was proof of limitless riches buried under the surface. They drained the lake in desperate attempts to recover treasure, finding only fragments, jewelry, ornaments. The bones of offerings meant never to return, yet these fragments were enough to keep the story alive. They proved there was some truth, and truth, however small, can inflate into legend when carried by longing. Gold itself adds to the paradox. Unlike other metals, it does not rust, corrode, or fade. It endures. For this reason, it became sacred in countless cultures, associated with the sun, with immortality, with gods. The Spanish saw it as wealth, as conquest. But to those who created the rituals, gold was not money. It was essence, a way of touching eternity. El Dorado may not have been about treasure at all. It may have been about communion with the divine, a myth mistranslated by greed into something far more literal. The myth continues in the present. Satellite imagery reveals hints of lost cities under jungle canopies. The Amazon, once thought too hostile for civilization, now appears to have supported millions. Earthworks, canals, and terraced fields suggest societies that rivaled the complexity of Mesopotamia or Egypt. Yet, because they were made of earth and wood, the jungle devoured them quickly, leaving little more than outlines in soil. In this way, El Dorado was not false. It was real, just not in the form imagined by desperate conquistadors. A city of gold never existed, but a city of abundance, sacredness, and wisdom did, and was lost before the outside world ever saw it. What fascinates is how El Dorado has shifted through time. At first, it was a person, then it became a place. Now it is an idea, the unreachable dream, the promise that perfection lies just ahead. If only we travel a little further, sacrifice a little more. It is the myth of human ambition itself. Each generation has its own El Dorado: wealth, knowledge, immortality, progress. We chase what glimmers, and even if it vanishes, the chase itself reshapes us. El Dorado may not exist, but the longing for it is real, and longing, when strong enough, is its own kind of truth. There is also the warning hidden in the myth. The search for El Dorado consumed lives, destroyed communities, and justified violence. How often do we chase illusions at such a cost? Even now the rainforest suffers, carved open for gold mining that poisons rivers and erases traditions. In this sense, El Dorado is not just a myth of the past. It is a curse of the present, humanity's hunger for more. For what glitters leads us deeper into destruction. The city may never be found because it has already been lost to us, buried not by jungle, but by our own insatiable greed. And yet, as you drift into the quiet of night, El Dorado still glows in the imagination. You can almost see it, a golden city at the heart of green wilderness, shimmering with light that is not of this world. Its walls gleam, its waters sing, its treasures lie untouched. Whether it is real or not, does not matter. El Dorado exists in the space between truth and dream, in the silence where desire turns into story. Close your eyes, and you too can walk its golden streets, if only in sleep. Across cultures and centuries, stories of giants rise like shadows too large to ignore. They appear in Norse sagas, in the Hebrew Bible, in Native American legends, in Greek myth, and in folklore scattered across the earth. Enormous beings, taller than trees, stronger than armies, walking across the landscape of memory. Some call them Nephilim, the offspring of angels and mortals. Others call them Jutnar, the titanic forces that oppose the gods of Asgard. Still others whisper of giant hunters, bone-crushing monsters or protectors who towered above ordinary people. They are dismissed as allegory, as exaggeration. Yet when myths of giants appear everywhere, in cultures that never touched, you begin to wonder, are these simply stories or memories of something real? The Bible tells of Goliath, the Philistine warrior defeated by David's sling. It describes men of great stature, who frightened even seasoned soldiers. In the Book of Numbers, scouts sent into Canaan reported seeing giants that made them feel like grasshoppers by comparison. The Norse told of frost giants, enemies of gods, who lived at the edges of the world in Jotunheim. In Greek myth, the Gigantomachy, the war of the gods against giants, was said to shape the balance of heaven and earth. In Native American lore, tribes from the Paiute to the Choctaw spoke of red-haired giants, cannibals who roamed the land and were eventually hunted down. These myths do not align perfectly, but together they suggest a pattern. Human beings remember giants, and the memory lingers in story. Science complicates the story. Archaeologists occasionally unearth bones so large that early discoverers believed them to be proof of giants. Mastodon and mammoth skeletons, when misidentified, easily fit the image of colossal humans. In the Middle Ages, femurs of prehistoric animals were displayed as relics of biblical giants. Even in the 18th century, scholars debated whether fossils might confirm the existence of enormous men. Modern anthropology tells us that gigantism, a rare condition in individuals, has always existed. Skeletons of people over 7 feet tall have been found, sometimes buried with care, sometimes with reverence. Could repeated encounters with such individuals have seeded legends that magnified reality into myth? And yet there are stranger findings. In Lovelock Cave, Nevada, early excavators reported unusually large skeletal remains, along with legends of the Paiute people, about a race of giant red-haired cannibals called the Saite-Ka. Many of the bones were later lost or dismissed, but the story persists, blending folklore with fragments of archaeology. In other places, megalithic structures raise similar questions. Stone circles, dolmens and monoliths that weigh hundreds of tons. How could ancient people move them without tools we understand? Did myths of giants emerge to explain the unexplainable, to personify the raw strength required to build what ordinary hands could not? The paradox is this: even if no evidence of entire races of giants survives, the universality of the myth suggests it carries truth in another form. Giants may not have walked the earth as titanic beings, but they may embody something humans always sensed: the presence of forces larger than ourselves, forces that shaped the land, the climate, the terror of nature. To a small community in a vast hostile world, mountains might feel alive, storms might roar like footsteps, earthquakes might resemble the wrath of enormous beings beneath the ground. To call these forces giants is less a lie than a way of giving shape to the overwhelming. But there is also the psychological giant. The way memory exaggerates. A man who stood a head taller than others becomes remembered as twice their size. A warrior whose strength was unmatched becomes described as someone who lifted entire boulders with ease. Stories pass from generation to generation, each teller adding a little more until the ordinary becomes monumental. Myth is not history, it is memory stretched by awe. In this sense, giants existed because people needed them to. They were proof of greatness, fear, and the scale of the unknown. Even now, the myth lingers in the subconscious. Modern fantasy and film resurrect giants, as if they are part of our collective dream. We still feel the presence of something larger, stronger, more powerful walking just beyond the edges of what we know. Giants are not just relics of the past, they are archetypes, symbols of every challenge that feels insurmountable, every fear that towers over us, every ambition that seems beyond our reach. To defeat a giant is to prove that even the impossible can fall. And yet, what if some fragment of the stories is real? What if in humanity's tangled prehistory, before written record, there were isolated groups of people whose stature exceeded the norm? What if bones, now scattered or misidentified, once told a story we are unwilling to accept? Or what if giants are real, not as flesh and blood, but as the persistent weight of memory itself, pressing on the human imagination? Myths survive not because they are false, but because they carry something we cannot let go of. As you drift deeper into thought, imagine standing at the foot of a mountain and feeling as if it breathes. Imagine hearing thunder that shakes the earth and wondering if it is a step, not a storm. Imagine meeting someone taller, stronger, unexplainable, and retelling that encounter until it becomes a legend that echoes for centuries. Giants may not walk the earth today, but they walk through story, through dream, through every culture that ever felt small beneath the vastness of the world. Perhaps giants were never meant to be creatures of flesh. Perhaps they were always metaphors, reminders that the world is immense, that we are fragile, and that wonder and fear magnify everything we see. In this way, giants are real because we made them real, and because we still need them. Close your eyes and let the footsteps echo in your imagination. Somewhere in the distance, beyond sleep, the giants of old still walk. Imagine the sea as a memory older than language. When you close your eyes, you can almost hear it whisper, waves breaking not just on shores, but against the ruins of forgotten cities. The story of Atlantis has survived for more than 2,000 years, carried in Plato's words like a fragment of dream carved into philosophy. He spoke of a mighty island empire, rich in knowledge, wealth, and power, that fell not by the hand of another kingdom, but by the fury of the earth and sea. One day it thrived, the next it sank beneath the waves, vanishing into silence. It sounds like a story meant for myth, but the persistence of Atlantis suggests something else. Perhaps it is less invention, more memory. Plato described Atlantis in two of his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. He claimed it lay beyond the Pillars of Heracles, which we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, a land larger than Libya and Asia combined, a place of marvels where palaces gleamed, canals crossed fertile plains, and temples rose in spirals of stone. Its people, blessed with great intelligence, grew arrogant, forgetting the divine balance between ambition and humility. Their downfall, he said, was not merely geological, it was moral. The gods punished Atlantis, letting it drown beneath the sea. To read this as pure allegory is easy, but to consider it as distorted history, that is harder, and perhaps more dangerous. Archaeologists and explorers have searched for Atlantis for centuries. Some place it in the Aegean, pointing to the island of Santorini, where a volcanic eruption around 1600 BCE destroyed the Minoan civilization. Here lies a tantalizing parallel, a wealthy maritime culture, advanced in architecture, trade and art, vanishing almost overnight into ash and sea. The remnants at Akrotiri, a city frozen in volcanic death, resemble Pompeii's tragic stillness. Could Plato have taken whispers of Minoan tragedy and reshaped them into Atlantis, magnified by memory and imagination? Or was he recounting a deeper truth, passed to him through Egyptian priests, who themselves may have preserved echoes of civilizations long erased? Others looked to Spain's marshlands, to the lost city said to lie beneath the mudflats of Doñana National Park. Satellite images revealed geometric rings eerily reminiscent of Plato's descriptions. The marshes were once open sea, and ancient floods could have buried a thriving culture beneath layers of sediment. Still others point to the Caribbean, to Cuba's submerged megaliths, or to the Azores in the Atlantic. Each claim fuels the same paradox. If so many places seem to fit, perhaps Atlantis is not one place but many, a collective memory of civilizations undone by water's timeless hunger. And then there is the psychological truth of Atlantis. It is not only a question of stone and ruin, It is a reflection of our fear that everything built can vanish. Cities today, glowing with lights, could be tomorrow's legends if swallowed by earthquakes, tsunamis, or the rising seas of climate. When you hear Plato's words, you are not just hearing about a mythic empire, you are hearing a warning echoing across time. Civilizations rise on pride and power, and civilizations fall when they forget their limits. Atlantis is both history's ghost and prophecy's shadow. Science offers its own whispers. Geologists have traced sudden cataclysms that align with such myths. Tsunamis caused by meteor strikes, sudden tectonic shifts, or supervolcanic eruptions that reshaped coastlines. The Black Sea itself may have once been a freshwater basin, until the Mediterranean breached its walls, flooding villages and forcing survivors to scatter. These refugees would have carried memories of a drowned world, retelling them until memory transformed into legend. Plato may have crystallized one of these stories, wrapping it in the moral cloak of philosophy. In this way, Atlantis is not lost. It exists in every story of flood, every ruin reclaimed by water, every reminder that the sea erases with infinite patience. But here lies the paradox. Myths that survive across time often survive because they are more than stories. They are fragments of reality, polished smooth by retelling. Atlantis is too precise, too detailed, too resonant to be dismissed as mere invention. Yet every attempt to pin it to a map leads to another uncertainty. The city may never be found in stone, because its truest existence is in us, in our longing for origins, in our suspicion that we are not the first to build towers that touch the sky, and in our fear that, like Atlantis, we too will sink. As you drift deeper, think of the ocean as a mirror. Beneath its waves may lie ruins, or perhaps only the ruins we project from our own imagination. Perhaps both. The sea does not need to reveal Atlantis for Atlantis to be real. Myths are real, not because they can be proven, but because they are believed, generation after generation, reshaped by memory until they become indistinguishable from truth. Atlantis may be gone, or it may never have existed, yet still it endures, its survival proof that some myths are too essential to die. Close your eyes now, and let yourself sink with it, into the quiet abyss where cities sleep, and where the difference between legend and history is blurred by water and dream. Atlantis does not need to be found. Atlantis has always been here, beneath the waves of memory, waiting for you. Legends whisper of women who rode into battle with spears, bows, and unmatched ferocity, warriors who needed no kings, no protectors, no masters. To the Greeks, they were the Amazons, fierce tribes of women living on the edges of the known world, where rivers and forests blurred into mystery. Herodotus spoke of them, as did countless poets. They were said to cut off one breast to better draw a bow, to live apart from men, to raise only their daughters, and send their sons away. For centuries, historians dismissed these tales as invention, a patriarchal fantasy of inversion, but the persistence of the Amazon myth across cultures, and the discoveries in archaeology, suggest that perhaps they were not fantasy at all, perhaps the Amazons were real. Greek myth made them famous. They fought Heracles in his labors, Achilles at Troy, Theseus in Athens. They appeared again and again, formidable, untamed, always dangerous. To the Greeks, the Amazons represented the reversal of order, women refusing submission, embodying the chaos of a world without hierarchy. Yet, even in portraying them as other, Greek storytellers could not resist giving them dignity. They were never shown as weak. They fought like equals, sometimes better than men. This paradox lingers. Why would a myth built to reinforce male dominance give so much strength to women, unless that strength came from somewhere true? Archaeology now reveals startling evidence. Excavations of Scythian burial mounds, stretching across the steppes of Eurasia, have uncovered the remains of women buried with weapons, armor, and horses. Some showed injuries from combat, their bones carrying scars of battle. These Scythian nomads were expert horse riders and archers, living in tribes where women often fought alongside men. The parallels to Amazon myths are striking. Herodotus himself described Scythian women warriors, noting that they lived freely, chose their partners, and fought in wars. What once was dismissed as fantasy now seems rooted in reality. The Amazons may not have been mythic at all, but echoes of Scythian warrior women who terrified Greek imagination. Other cultures echo the same stories. In West Africa, the kingdom of Dahomey had regiments of women warriors, the Agogi, who fought with discipline and ferocity into the 19th century. European colonizers were stunned by their strength, their courage, their refusal to yield. In South America, Spanish explorers told of tribes of women living without men, raising arms in defense of their lands. The Amazon River itself bears their name because conquistadors swore they encountered such warriors. Perhaps exaggeration colored their tales, but the repetition is difficult to ignore. Across continents, separated by oceans, people remembered women who took up arms and lived beyond expected roles. The myth of Amazons also reflects fear and fascination. To men who built societies on control, the idea of women who rejected control was unsettling. The Greeks placed Amazons at the edge of their maps, in wild lands that blurred into the unknown. They became symbols of inversion, chaos, the dangers of what happens when the natural order is undone. Yet myths often preserve what history cannot admit, the possibility that equality once existed, that societies where women fought and ruled were not fantasy but memory. The Amazons stand as proof that patriarchy is not inevitable. But there is another layer. The myth endures because it represents something deeper than history. It embodies the archetype of resistance. To imagine Amazons is to imagine freedom, power, and independence, regardless of gender. They are not only women of the past, they are the timeless dream of liberation. Whether they lived on horseback across the steppes, or along rivers in forgotten jungles, or only in the imagination of poets, they exist because we need them to. They remind us that strength wears many forms, that dominance is never absolute, that even the most rigid systems can be challenged by those willing to fight. Modern discoveries continue to blur the line between myth and truth. DNA analysis of Scythian remains confirms that nearly a third of warrior graves once thought male actually belonged to women, buried with bows, quivers, swords, and horses. They were honored not as exceptions but as warriors among warriors. For centuries, archaeologists misread them, unable to reconcile the evidence with assumptions about gender. Only now do the bones speak more clearly, revealing that what Greeks once exaggerated into myth may have been everyday reality on the steppes. The Amazons were not a singular people. They were a recurring truth. Women who refused the roles assigned to them. And still, the myth carries paradox. Myths of Amazons always end with their defeat. In Greek tales, they fall to heroes like Achilles and Heracles, reminders that order must be restored. Yet the very survival of the stories keeps their defiance alive. Even in defeat, Amazons endure. They live on, not because they lost, but because they existed at all, burning so brightly in memory that their image could never be erased. That is the strange immortality of myth. Suppression in story often ensures survival in imagination. As you drift into the soft haze of thought, imagine the rustle of grasslands, the thunder of hooves, the gleam of spears under the sun. Imagine women riding in perfect formation, their eyes sharp, their voices steady, their arrows flying in arcs of defiance. Whether they were Scythian nomads, African warriors, or dreams at the edge of Greek maps, they are still here. You can hear them in every story of resistance, in every struggle for equality, in every echo of freedom. The Amazons remind us that myth and truth are not always separate. They are reflections of each other, blurred like the line between sleep and waking. Close your eyes, and let the sound of hooves carry you further. Somewhere, just beyond history's borders, the Amazon warrior women still ride. The desert has a way of keeping secrets. Beneath the sands of Egypt, time folds in layers, and history sleeps in silence until someone dares to disturb it. In 1922, Howard Carter and his team broke through a sealed doorway in the Valley of the Kings and entered the tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun, the boy king who ruled more than 3,000 years ago. What they found astonished the world: golden shrines, jeweled chariots, funerary masks gleaming with lapis and obsidian, treasures untouched by centuries of grave robbers. Yet the discovery carried with it something darker. Whispers spread of a curse, a force that punished those who disturbed the king's eternal rest. One by one, deaths, illnesses, and misfortunes struck the men who had entered. Newspapers called it the curse of King Tut, and the myth was reborn for a new age. The legend of cursed tombs was not new. Ancient Egyptians themselves inscribed warnings on burial chambers. Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the king's peace. These phrases may have been symbolic, meant to deter robbers. Yet, in the modern world, when Carter's discovery made headlines, the idea of a curse found fertile ground. Lord Carnarvon, Carter's benefactor, died suddenly a few months after the tomb was opened, an infected mosquito bite turning septic. His death was reported worldwide as proof of the curse. Strange coincidences followed. A cobra sacred to Egypt slithered into Carter's house and killed his canary, a dark omen. Other team members and visitors fell ill, died mysteriously, or or suffered misfortunes. By the time the treasures of Tutankhamun traveled to exhibitions in London and beyond, the curse was as famous as the boy king himself. Science offers explanations. Tombs sealed for millennia may harbor deadly spores, bacteria, or molds. Ancient air, trapped for centuries, could infect the lungs of those who dared enter. Lord Carnarvon's death may have been mere coincidence, worsened by poor medical treatment of the time. Many who worked on the tomb lived long lives, including Carter himself, who survived another 16 years. Statistically, the supposed curse kills far fewer than chance alone might, but the myth resists logic. It persists because the story is too perfect. A king buried in gold, disturbed by modern greed, unleashes ancient vengeance. And there is truth within the symbolism. The Egyptians believed that disturbing a tomb was not simply theft. It was an assault on the eternal life of the deceased. Their elaborate rituals, mummification, and sealed chambers were meant to preserve the cowl, the spirit. To open a tomb was to shatter eternity itself. In this sense, the curse was not superstition but warning, a reminder that respect for the dead is part of the balance between the living and the eternal. The modern obsession with unsealing tombs and displaying bodies in museums is its own kind of sacrilege. The myth of the curse lingers because we feel deep down that the Egyptians were right to demand reverence. There are stranger coincidences too. The day Carnarvon died, lights reportedly flickered and went out across Cairo. At his home in England, his dog howled and dropped dead at the same hour. Skeptics dismiss these tales as embellishments, but myths thrive on precisely this kind of uncanny detail. Whether true or not, such stories echo through imagination, strengthening the belief that forces beyond our understanding were at play. The curse has also shaped how we think about Egypt itself. To Westerners, it reinforced the idea of a land steeped in mystery and danger, where ancient magic still lingers in the sand. The mummy's curse became a trope in literature and film, from gothic horror to modern adventure. In each version, the lesson is the same: trespass against eternity, and eternity will strike back. Myths endure because they give shape to our fears, and in this case, the fear is that our quest for knowledge, wealth, or glory might awaken something we cannot control. But what if the curse is not about supernatural vengeance at all? What if it is about memory? Tutankhamun was a forgotten pharaoh, erased from history by those who came after him. His reign was short, his deeds unremarkable, his name nearly lost. The discovery of his tomb restored him to immortality, but also at a price. His body became an object, his treasures carted away, his eternal rest shattered for the gaze of millions. The curse may not lie in death, but in exposure, an eternal reminder that some things are not meant to be disturbed. And here lies the paradox. If the curse were truly lethal, we would have stopped opening tombs. Yet the myth of the curse only fuels curiosity. Tourists flock to see Tutankhamun's mask, to walk where Carter once walked, to feel the chill of forbidden knowledge. The curse, instead of protecting the king, has immortalized him. It has ensured his story will never fade again. In this way, the myth achieves what it warns against. Disturbing the dead has given them eternal life in memory. As you sink into the quiet of thought, imagine the tomb in darkness. Dust floats in air that has not moved for centuries. Gold gleams in torchlight. Jewels sparkle like frozen stars, and a still figure lies in silence. Outside, the world clamors for treasure, for knowledge, for spectacle. Inside, there is only waiting. Perhaps the curse is not wrath at all, but sorrow, the sorrow of a king whose eternity was stolen. Close your eyes, and you can almost hear his whisper. Some mysteries are not meant for the living. The sea has always been a place of both wonder and terror. To sail into open waters is to enter a world where the horizon never ends, and the depths hold secrets no eye has ever seen. For sailors of the past, those depths were not empty. They were alive. They told stories of a creature so vast that it could drag ships beneath the waves, a monster with tentacles long enough to crush masts, a shadow in the water that blotted out the sun. They called it the Kraken. For centuries the legend haunted maps and imagination alike. Some dismissed it as drunken sailors' tales. Others swore they had seen it, had fought it, had felt its pull into the abyss. Myths fade when they are too implausible, but the Kraken never faded, because deep in the ocean something real may have always been waiting. The earliest references come from Norse sagas, where the Kraken was described as a massive sea creature lurking off the coasts of Norway and Greenland. Writers claimed it was so large that sailors mistook its body for an island. Some legends say that fishermen would anchor on its back, only to realize too late that the land beneath them was alive. As the creature submerged, entire ships were swallowed by whirlpools. To the Norse, the Kraken was not just monster but metaphor, a reminder of the ocean's vast power, the danger of venturing too far from shore, the fragility of men before the abyss. Yet the fact that stories appeared again and again suggests that they were not merely symbolic, they were also reports of something seen, something terrifyingly real. In the 18th century, naturalists began to take these legends seriously. Erik Pontoppidan, Bishop of Bergen, wrote in his 1752 Natural History of Norway about the Kraken as if it were a real species. A creature so immense that it seems more like an island than an animal. Reports of enormous tentacles rising from the water, of ships dragged down, of carcasses washed ashore, all circulated with growing urgency. Skeptics scoffed, but the tales persisted, often accompanied by drawings of monstrous cephalopods large enough to crush warships. Myths usually shrink under scrutiny, but this one seemed to expand the more it was examined. And then, in the modern age, truth began to surface. The giant squid, once considered a myth, is now a proven creature. Architeuthis ducks, growing up to 40 feet long, with eyes the size of dinner plates and tentacles lined with hooks and suckers. Even more fearsome is the colossal squid, dwelling in Antarctic waters, heavier, thicker, and stranger than its cousin. Though they rarely surface alive, their remains have been found in the bellies of sperm whales, their limbs scarred with battles fought in the blackness of the deep. Photographs and videos captured in recent decades confirm what sailors suspected. There are creatures in the ocean that match the Kraken's description more closely than myth alone can explain. Yet, the mystery does not vanish. Squids of known species are vast, but are they large enough to match the legends? Sailors spoke of creatures larger still, monstrous beings whose tentacles spanned entire decks, whose strength was unstoppable. Perhaps exaggeration shaped the myth. A storm at sea combined with glimpses of enormous squids or whales could easily grow into stories of monsters. But perhaps the myth points to more. The ocean remains largely unexplored. Some estimate that more than 80% of it is unmapped, unobserved, unknown. If giants already exist in the deep, what prevents us from imagining larger ones? The Kraken survives because the sea itself remains a mystery, and mystery is fertile ground for belief. The paradox of the Kraken is that it represents both fear and fascination. Sailors dreaded it, yet they spoke of it with awe. To encounter the Kraken was to stand at the edge of human limits. It was proof that the sea was not ours to command, that there were forces beneath the waves that defied our understanding. Even now, the thought of a creature larger than a submarine, gliding silently through the deep, awakens something primal. We know the Kraken is myth, but we also know the ocean hides truths we have not yet faced. Consider too how myths of sea monsters appear across cultures, from the Leviathan of Hebrew texts, to the Umibuzu of Japanese lore, to the monstrous fish of Polynesian traditions. Humanity has always imagined beings beneath the surface too vast to comprehend. These myths converge not because people copied one another, but because the experience of the sea itself demands explanation. Storms, rogue waves, strange shadows in the water, these invite us to personify them, to make them creatures. The Kraken, then, is not only a beast, it is the shape we give to the terror of the unknown. But sometimes myth and science touch. In 1873, fishermen off Newfoundland pulled up parts of a giant squid tangled in their lines. Newspapers reported the find as proof of the Kraken. Later, more remains were found. In 2004, Japanese researchers finally filmed a live giant squid in its natural habitat, its tentacles glowing silver in the dark. Each discovery blurs the line further. The Kraken may not be an island-sized monster, but it is no longer entirely myth. It exists, though perhaps smaller than legend, waiting in waters so deep we can barely imagine them. As you drift towards sleep, picture yourself on a ship in still waters. The sea is calm, stars glitter above, and then the water stirs. A shape emerges, not land, not wave, but something vast and alive. Tentacles break the surface, eyes glimmer like moons, and the ship begins to tilt. You cannot fight it. You cannot reason with it. The ocean opens, and you are reminded that humanity has always been small before the deep. The Kraken is not only a monster, it is the truth that the world is bigger than us, and always will be. Imagine a desert kingdom where the heat bleaches the stones, and the air itself seems to shimmer with thirst. Now imagine, at the heart of that parched world, a mountain of green terraces overflowing with trees, flowers, vines and waterfalls cascading down walls of brick. Birds wheel above, shade covers courtyards, and the scent of blossoms drifts through the dry wind. This is the vision of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Ancient writers spoke of it with awe, yet no ruins have ever been found. Some believe it was myth, a dream written into history. Others insist it was real, a marvel of engineering that has simply vanished. Between legend and archaeology, the gardens still hang, suspended in memory. The story most often told begins with King Nebuchadnezzar II, who ruled Babylon in the 6th century BCE. According to later Greek historians, he built the gardens for his queen, Emetis of Media. Longing for the green mountains of her homeland, she grieved in the flat plains of Mesopotamia. To comfort her, Nebuchadnezzar ordered the construction of an artificial paradise, terraces rising like steps into the sky, irrigated with water lifted from the Euphrates River. Stone vaults supported soil deep enough to hold trees. Aqueducts and screw-like devices may have raised water to the highest levels, creating an oasis in the desert. If this account is true, the gardens were not only a gesture of love, but a feat of genius, blending architecture, hydraulics, and imagination into one of history's greatest achievements. Yet here lies the paradox. No Babylonian texts mention the gardens. The story comes mainly from Greek writers, Herodotus, Strabo, Diodorus Siculus, writing centuries later. Their descriptions vary, sometimes conflicting. Some place the gardens in Babylon itself, others suggest Nineveh, capital of the Assyrian Empire. Modern archaeologists have excavated Babylon extensively, uncovering temples, ziggurats, palaces, walls, but never a trace of terraces grand enough to match the accounts. Did the gardens ever exist, or were they literary invention, a symbol of power more than a place of stone and root? Some scholars argue they may have been real but misattributed. In Nineveh, ruins show evidence of elaborate aqueducts and terraced structures built by King Sennacherib of Assyria, a century before Nebuchadnezzar. Inscriptions describe his wonder for all people, with water carried across miles to feed his gardens. Perhaps the Greeks confused Babylon with Nineveh, transferring the wonder to the more famous city. If so, then the Hanging Gardens may not have hung in Babylon at all, but in a neighboring empire, their memory blurred by time and distance. Even if the exact location is uncertain, the idea of the gardens speaks to something enduring. In a harsh landscape, to build a paradise of green was to defy nature. The image of lush terraces rising against a barren horizon is so powerful that it became immortal, even without ruins to prove it. Myths survive not only because they are true, but because they represent what humanity longs for. The Hanging Gardens may be as much dream as fact. The dream of bending nature to beauty, of creating life where none should thrive, of building love into architecture. Consider, too, the technical mystery. How would ancient engineers have lifted water to such heights without modern pumps? Some propose the Archimedes screw, though that device is usually dated later. Others imagine chain pumps or counterweighted buckets. Innovations lost to history. If true, the gardens were not only beautiful, they were revolutionary, centuries ahead of their time. Perhaps this is why they were remembered as a wonder, not only for their appearance but for the impossible made possible. The gardens also reveal the way memory works. When Greek writers described them, they may have been weaving together truth, rumor, and imagination. A traveler sees an elaborate courtyard, exaggerates its scale, adds a detail of vines, water, terraces. Another repeats the story, embellishing further. Soon the gardens grow in the telling, until they rival mountains themselves. By the time the accounts were written, the wonder may have already vanished, leaving only memory to bloom larger than reality. Myths often grow like gardens themselves, seeded by fact, watered by longing, flourishing in the soil of imagination. And yet, the absence of evidence is not proof of absence. Babylon lies under centuries of shifting earth and war. Much of the site remains buried, eroded, or destroyed. The Euphrates itself has shifted course, washing away parts of the ancient city. If the gardens once stood, their remains may have been dismantled, recycled, or lost beneath layers of time. Just because we cannot see them, does not mean they were never there. The paradox of the Hanging Gardens is that they exist most vividly in the mind. Whether real or not, their image endures, inspiring artists, poets, architects. Modern skyscrapers mimic their terraced greenery. Urban planners dream of vertical forests rising among steel and glass. In every rooftop garden, every balcony overflowing with vines, you can glimpse a shadow of Babylon's wonder. Myth has become blueprint, shaping reality in its image. As you drift into thought, Picture it. The desert heat pressing down, the sound of water trickling over stone, the cool shade of palms above your head. Flowers bloom in impossible abundance. Birds sing, and the horizon blurs into green. The hanging gardens may never have existed, or they may have stood for only a brief moment in history before vanishing, but in dream, they still rise. Myth does not require proof. Myth requires belief, and belief is enough to keep the gardens alive, hanging not in Babylon, but in memory, suspended forever between history and imagination. In the silence of dawn, before the first light touches the horizon, imagine a bird glowing with its own fire. Its wings shimmer like embers, its cry echoes like the crackle of flames, and when it dies, it does not fade into ash and nothingness. Instead, it is reborn, rising again from its own remains, eternal, untouchable. This is the phoenix myth to some, prophecy to others. From Egypt to Greece, from China to Persia, cultures separated by distance told stories of a bird that never truly dies. Myths that cross borders often conceal a deeper truth, and the phoenix burns at the center of humanity's longing, the hope that death is not the end. The earliest roots of the phoenix are found in Egypt, in the story of the Bennu bird. Associated with the sun god Ra, the Bennu was said to rise from fire and to perch upon the sacred willow at Heliopolis, singing at the beginning of time. Its cycle was eternal. It lived for hundreds of years, then built a nest of aromatic woods and spices, set it aflame, and was consumed, only to be reborn from the ashes. To Egyptians, the Bennu symbolized the flooding of the Nile, the daily rebirth of the sun, and the eternal cycle of life. From there the story spread, carried by traders, travelers and conquerors, reshaping itself in each culture it touched. The Greeks embraced the myth, calling the bird the phoenix, linking it to the word for purple-red, the color of flame. Herodotus wrote of it as a miraculous creature that appeared in Egypt every 500 years, bringing the body of its predecessor encased in myrrh to the altar of the sun god. Roman poets like Ovid and Pliny the Elder expanded the legend, turning it into a metaphor for empire, resilience, and eternity. For early Christians, the phoenix became a symbol of resurrection, proof that life triumphs over death, that faith promises renewal. In China, the Fengguang embodied harmony, rebirth, and divine order, often paired with the dragon as a cosmic balance. Though the details differ, the pattern is clear. The world remembers a bird that dies yet does not die, a creature of fire that embodies immortality itself. But where does this myth come from? Some scholars suggest that the phoenix may be rooted in real creatures observed through the lens of imagination. The flamingo, with its brilliant red feathers, builds nests of mud and returns in great cycles, perhaps inspiring the Bennu. Other theories point to the peacock, whose plumage glimmers like fire, or to the ostrich, strong and strange, revered in ancient deserts. Yet none of these birds burn. None of them rise from ashes. The phoenix is something more, not a creature of biology, but of memory, a myth born of humanity's deepest desire to escape mortality. The paradox of the phoenix is that it is both impossible and inevitable. No bird combusts into flame and rises again. Yet every sunrise is a phoenix. Every spring after winter, every seed sprouting after decay. The myth survives because nature itself offers endless metaphors of rebirth. Fire destroys forests, yet from the ashes, new shoots rise. The human body dies, but children carry its legacy. Civilizations collapse, but their ruins give birth to new societies. The phoenix is not simply a bird, it is the pattern of existence itself. Consider how the phoenix has shaped culture. Alchemists saw in it the symbol of transformation, fire turning lead into gold, mortality into immortality. Artists painted it as a reminder that death is not destruction, but passage. Even today, we speak of phoenixes rising from ashes when cities rebuild after disaster, when lives recover after ruin, when individuals find strength in loss. The myth is ancient, yet its fire still burns because it speaks to something timeless, the refusal to accept final endings. Yet there is also a warning in the phoenix. To be reborn, it must burn. Renewal demands destruction. Creation demands sacrifice. In this way, the myth reminds us that change is never gentle. To rise again, something must first fall apart. This truth unsettles us. We long for immortality without loss, for renewal without pain, but the phoenix whispers otherwise. Fire is the price of life. Perhaps that is why the myth endures. It tells us the truth we avoid, wrapped in beauty, cloaked in flame. As you drift deeper into thought, imagine the bird itself, Its feathers shimmer like molten gold. Its wings trail sparks across the night. It lands upon a nest woven of cinnamon branches and fragrant herbs. Slowly it ignites. Flames consume it, and for a moment there is only ash, silence, darkness. Then, from the embers movement, a small shape unfurls, glowing, growing, until the phoenix rises once more, its cry breaking the stillness of eternity. You realize the myth is not about birds at all. It is about you, about us, about the endless cycle of endings and beginnings that defines every life. The phoenix does not need to be real in feathers and bone. It is real in the way fire destroys and gives back, in the way grief breaks and heals, in the way time itself circles back to where it began. Myths endure not because they are literal, but because they tell truths deeper than fact. The phoenix's eternal fire reminds us that nothing truly ends. It only changes form, and in that truth, the myth burns forever, undying. In the mountains and valleys of ancient China, peasants would sometimes stumble upon enormous bones buried in the earth. Vast femurs, curved jaws, teeth larger than a man's hand. They called them long gu dragon bones. To them, the explanation was obvious. Dragons had always been part of their world, serpentine beings who brought rain, storms, and fortune. The bones were the proof, the remnants of creatures too vast and powerful to live in ordinary times. Ground into powders, mixed into medicines, they were thought to carry healing powers, the strength of the dragon distilled into mortal hands. For centuries no one doubted. Dragons were real. The bones said so. It is only in modern times that we realize those dragon bones were fossils, the remains of dinosaurs, mammoths, prehistoric beasts long extinct. Yet here lies the paradox. While science rewrote the explanation, it did not erase the myth. Instead, it revealed how myth can preserve memory. For thousands of years, without the language of paleontology, ancient people still recognized the awe of bones too massive to belong to any ordinary creature. They built stories to explain them, and those stories survived across millennia. In this way, dragons were real, not as fire-breathing serpents, but as echoes of creatures that once walked the earth. Chinese culture embraced dragons, not as monsters but as symbols of power and harmony. Unlike the fearsome beasts of Europe, Chinese dragons were protectors, guardians of rivers and rain, bearers of prosperity. They embodied the balance between heaven and earth. When peasants unearthed strange bones, it only confirmed what they already believed. The earth itself remembered the dragon. Records from as early as the Han dynasty describe the use of dragon bones in medicine. Apothecaries ground them into powders to cure fevers, headaches, and spirits thought to disturb the body. Fossils became not relics of prehistory, but living medicine. Myths shaped reality in the most tangible way. People consumed the remains of creatures millions of years old, believing they were swallowing fragments of dragons. Western travelers were astonished by this practice. Marco Polo spoke of dragons in China, describing them as if they were real creatures. Even into the 19th and 20th centuries, fossil hunters in China found their work shaped by local traditions. Farmers who uncovered bones did not see scientific specimens. They saw remnants of myth. Some were reluctant to sell or surrender them, believing they held power. Others saw opportunity, offering fossils to apothecaries or collectors. In this way, myths of dragons preserved fossils long before science named them. Without the myth, many might never have been noticed at all. The story deepens when you consider how closely dragon myths match certain prehistoric creatures. Gigantic skeletons of sauropods, with their long necks and tails, resemble the serpentine forms of dragons. Pterosaur fossils, with their winged frames, evoke flying beasts. Mammoth tusks suggest creatures of impossible size. Ancient people did not misinterpret what they saw. They interpreted it through the lens available to them. And in that interpretation, they preserved a truth that the earth once held giants beyond imagination. Myths filled the gaps science could not yet explain. But there is something more. Myths of dragons extend beyond China. They appear in Europe, in Mesopotamia, in the Americas. Everywhere people uncovered strange bones, they imagined similar creatures. Why? Because fossils are universal. They rise from the earth in every land, and each culture explains them in its own way. In China, they became dragons of harmony. In Europe, they became monsters to be slain by saints. In both cases, myth grew from bone, from physical evidence that demanded explanation. The persistence of dragons across cultures suggests not mere invention, but shared encounters with the silent testimony of stone. The paradox is that myths of dragons may be more accurate than we once thought. Dinosaurs, after all, were real. Massive reptiles, some with wings, claws, and teeth sharp enough to tear through flesh, once ruled the world. They did not breathe fire, but meteors and volcanoes gave their ending, apocalyptic fire nonetheless. When you imagine a dragon, are you imagining fantasy, or are you remembering, in some deep ancestral way, a reality your species never saw, but inherited through the bones of Earth? Even today, dragon bones still shape culture. In parts of rural China, fossilized bones continue to be sold as traditional medicine. At the same time, paleontologists study those same fossils to reconstruct prehistoric worlds. Science and myth walk side by side, each telling a version of the same story, that the ground beneath our feet hides secrets of creatures long gone, creatures too vast to ignore. The myth of dragons is not false, it is a different language for the same ore that science now translates with equations and measurements. As you drift deeper, imagine holding one of those bones in your hands. It is heavy, curved, ancient beyond time. You do not know the word dinosaur. You only know that it is not human, not animal, not ordinary. You imagine wings, scales, the rumble of thunder when it moves. You grind the bone into powder, swallow it, and believe you are taking in strength itself. In your belief, the dragon lives again, rising not from ash, but from imagination. And in that moment, myth and truth are indistinguishable. The dragon does not need to be real in flesh and fire. It is real because it has always been part of the human story, born from the bones of giants, carried through centuries of medicine, art, and legend. The fossils remain silent, but the myths speak for them, and as long as those myths endure, the dragon will never vanish. High in the mountains of Greece, where cliffs rise against the sky, and valleys spill into shadows, there was once a place where the divine was said to speak directly to humankind. This was Delphi, home of the oracle, a sanctuary to Apollo, where kings, generals, and ordinary wanderers alike came to ask questions of fate. At the center of the temple, a woman known as the Pythia sat upon a tripod above a chasm, inhaling vapors that rose from the earth. In trance, she spoke in fragments, visions, riddles, answers wrapped in ambiguity. To the Greeks, her words were not guesses, they were revelations. They believed the god himself spoke through her. Yet behind the myth of prophecy, there may be a deeper truth, one that blurs the line between divinity and the strange powers of the human mind. The Oracle of Delphi was considered the very navel of the world. A stone known as the Omphalos marked the spot, said to be where two eagles released by Zeus met, proving Delphi to be the center of all things. Pilgrims traveled from across the Mediterranean, bearing gifts and sacrifices. They would purify themselves in the nearby Castalian spring, then ascend to the temple where the Pythia waited. Her answers determined wars, the founding of colonies, the rise and fall of rulers. Few institutions in the ancient world wielded such influence, and yet her pronouncements were never straightforward. They came in riddles. If you cross this river, a great empire will fall. The prophecy was true, but never clear whose empire it would be. The genius of Delphi was that its words fit any outcome. For centuries, skeptics believed the oracle's visions were invention, the words of clever priests manipulating politics. But modern science has uncovered something astonishing. Geologists studying Delphi discovered that the temple sits atop the intersection of two fault lines. These fractures in the earth release gases, particularly ethylene, a sweet-smelling vapor known to cause trance-like states, euphoria, and hallucinations when inhaled in small doses. Ancient writers described the Pythia as entering an ecstatic state, shaking, foaming at the mouth before delivering her cryptic words. What sounded like possession may have been the physiological effects of the earth itself, seeping into her lungs, altering her mind, opening doors to visions both terrifying and profound. This discovery blurs the line between myth and science. The Greeks believed Apollo spoke through the oracle. Science suggests the earth itself spoke, through chemistry and geology. Which is stranger, that a god descended into a woman's body, or that the planet releases gases that bend human consciousness into prophecy? Either way, the result was the same: words that carried weight, visions that altered history. Myths survive not because they are false, but because they cloak truths in a language humans can understand. The Oracle of Delphi was real, not as magic beyond reason, but as the merging of earth, body, and belief. The paradox of the Oracle is its ambiguity. Every prophecy was true, but never in the way expected. Croesus, king of Lydia, asked whether he should wage war against Persia. The oracle replied. If you do, a great empire will fall. Croesus attacked, believing the prophecy promised his victory. The empire that fell was his own. To modern eyes, this looks like trickery. Yet to the ancients, it proved the oracle's power. The gods spoke in riddles, because fate itself is riddling. The future cannot be simple, it is always layered, always paradoxical, always slipping between meanings until it has already happened. But perhaps the oracle's true power was not in predicting events, but in shaping decisions. A general who believed Apollo supported him, marched into war with confidence. A king who thought the gods warned against hubris, ruled with caution. In this way, the oracle became a mirror. She reflected back the fears and hopes of those who asked, cloaking them in divine words that gave weight to choices. Fate was not dictated by prophecy. It was created by belief in prophecy. Myth became reality not through proof, but through faith. Even now, the myth of Delphi lingers. Psychologists compare the oracle to the unconscious mind, where visions and symbols arise without reason yet carry truth. Neurologists note that trance states can unlock unusual clarity, flashes of insight that feel like messages from beyond. Writers and thinkers still speak of Delphic words, riddles that are both true and incomprehensible. The myth has not faded because it represents something timeless. The human hunger to know what lies ahead, the fear that we cannot control it, and the strange ways our own minds give us glimpses of what we most need to hear. As you drift into the quiet, imagine the temple. Torches flicker, incense burns. The Pythia sways, her eyes distant, her voice low and trembling. Around her, priests lean in, straining to catch each syllable. Outside, the mountains loom, the earth hums, the air tastes faintly sweet. You ask your question, and her reply comes as a riddle, simple yet infinite. You leave both certain and uncertain, haunted by the paradox that the answer is always both true and unclear. The Oracle of Delphi may no longer speak, the temple long ruined, the vapors gone, yet her voice still echoes in every moment of doubt, every decision that feels like a leap into the unknown. Her visions remind us that the future is never fixed, that knowledge itself is elusive, and that sometimes the most powerful truths are those that refuse to be pinned down. Water is both life and destruction. It nourishes fields, carries boats, and sustains bodies, but it also swallows land, erases villages, and washes away everything we build. Across the world, in culture after culture, one story endures above almost all others: the flood that destroyed nearly everything, from Mesopotamia to India, from Greece to the Americas. People remembered a time when waters rose so high that they swallowed whole civilizations. In each version, a few survived, on a boat, on a mountain, in a vessel of wood or stone, while the rest of humanity vanished beneath waves. Myths do not spread so universally by accident. The Great Flood may be less an invention than a shared memory, a scar written into human storytelling. The oldest version comes from Mesopotamia, in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Utnapishtim, warned by the gods of a coming deluge, builds a massive boat, fills it with animals and family, and survives the storm that destroys the world. When the waters recede, he sends out birds to search for land. The resemblance to the story of Noah is unmistakable. In the Hebrew Bible, Noah too builds an ark, saves pairs of animals, survives rain lasting 40 days, and releases a dove that returns with an olive branch. In India, the story tells of Manu, who is warned by a fish of a flood and builds a boat tied to the horn of that same fish, who guides him to safety. In Greek myth, Deucalion and Pyrrha survive a flood sent by Zeus, repopulating the earth by casting stones behind them that transform into people. Even in the Americas, the Aztecs, Mayans and Hopi told stories of floods that ended worlds. How can so many cultures separated by oceans and centuries share the same story unless something real lies beneath it? Geologists suggest there may be truth. Around 10,000 years ago, as the last ice age ended, glaciers melted, sea levels rose, and coastlines flooded. Villages along ancient shores disappeared, leaving no trace but memory. In the Black Sea region, archaeologists found evidence that a sudden flood around 5,600 BCE transformed the basin from freshwater to saltwater, drowning settlements and forcing migrations. Survivors of such cataclysms would have told their children, who told theirs, until the memory of local disaster became myth of global deluge. Myths preserve history, but in distorted form. The flood may not have destroyed the entire world, but to those who survived, it destroyed their world. There is also the psychological truth. Flood myths capture the feeling of helplessness before nature's power. A storm, a rising river, an ocean tide. These are forces that no human can resist. To imagine waters swallowing everything is to imagine ultimate vulnerability, ultimate surrender. Yet within the myth is also hope. The flood destroys, but it does not erase entirely. There are always survivors, always renewal, always the promise that life begins again after disaster. In this sense, the flood is not only destruction, it is purification. The world is cleansed of corruption, and a new order begins. The paradox of the flood myth is that it is both terrifying and comforting. It teaches that everything can be taken, that no walls or kingdoms are strong enough against nature, but it also teaches that survival is possible, that humanity endures even when all seems lost. The ark, the boat, the mountain, all become symbols of resilience. To tell the flood story is to remind ourselves that even when the world ends, it begins again. Science and myth intertwine in unexpected ways. Archaeologists have found evidence of massive tsunamis caused by volcanic eruptions, like Thera in the Aegean, or meteors striking the ocean, sending waves taller than buildings across coastlines. Oral traditions may preserve fragments of such events, carried for millennia. Aboriginal Australian stories of rising seas date back thousands of years, aligning with actual geological changes. Myths, then, are not mere fantasies. They are archives of memory, holding truths longer than written records. And yet, the flood myth is also symbolic. Water is change, water is forgetting, water is renewal. To dream of a flood is to dream of the self being washed away, stripped down, made new. Perhaps this is why flood stories resonate in every culture. They reflect not only external events, but inner transformations. Loves collapse, identities drown, but something always survives, something always rebuilds. The flood is as much inside us as it is outside. As you drift further, imagine the waters rising. The river swells beyond its banks, fields disappear, the sea rushes inland, houses crumble, temples sink, voices vanish beneath waves. You cling to a vessel, or to the peak of a mountain, waiting for the waters to recede. Days pass in silence. Then, slowly, the surface calms, land appears, birds return, the air clears, life begins again. The terror of the flood gives way to the wonder of survival. And in that moment, you understand why the story never dies. It is not only history, it is prophecy. The flood has happened, it will happen again, and each time humanity will emerge, scarred but alive. The Great Flood may never have destroyed the entire world, but it destroyed enough worlds, villages, cities, lives, that its memory became universal. Myths endure because they tell truths that facts alone cannot carry. The flood is both history and metaphor, destruction and renewal, fear and hope. In every drop of water lies the story of drowning and rebirth, and so the myth lives on, eternal as the tide. Across centuries, explorers searched not only for land or gold, but for something far more elusive, the promise of youth eternal. Legends spoke of a spring whose waters could reverse age, heal wounds, restore vigor, and grant life without end. Drink, and the years would fall away like dust. Bathe, and the body would be renewed, as if time itself had been washed from the skin. It was called the Fountain of Youth, and though no map ever charted its exact location, countless maps hinted at it. Somewhere in the distance, always just beyond reach, lay the source of immortality. The story became most famous through the Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon, who, according to later tales, sailed to Florida in the early 16th century, searching for the fountain. Chroniclers wrote that he was driven by the promise of waters that could turn the old young again. But history complicates this story. Contemporary accounts never mention him seeking such a spring. Only later writers embellished his voyage with the myth. Yet the myth stuck, because it carried something more powerful than fact. It offered hope. The new world was a place of wonders beyond imagination. Why not a fountain that defeated time itself? The roots of the fountain myth stretch further back. In ancient Greece, poets spoke of magical springs that restored life. Herodotus described a fountain in Ethiopia where waters granted longevity. In the Middle East, the legend of the water of life ran through Persian and Arabic tales, promising renewal to those who found it. In Asia, similar stories spoke of elixirs of immortality, potions brewed by alchemists, sacred springs hidden in mountains. Across cultures, across continents, humans dreamed of the same thing, that somewhere, somehow, death was not inevitable. But why do such myths endure? Perhaps because they speak to the deepest fear and the deepest desire. Death is certain, and youth is fleeting. To imagine a cure is to imagine breaking the one law, no one can escape. The Fountain of Youth is not just a place, it is the embodiment of longing itself. It is the idea that we might step outside the flow of time, even for a moment, and reclaim what has been lost. Science offers its own reflections. Water itself has always been associated with renewal. Rivers flood fields and bring fertility. Springs gush with freshness, quenching thirst. To immerse oneself in water is to feel cleansed, reborn. Myths of healing springs often emerge around real mineral waters, rich in salts and elements that soothe the body. Ancient spas in Greece, Rome and India were thought to cure illness, and in some cases they did. The Fountain of Youth may not have been magic, but it was rooted in truth. Water heals, refreshes, and restores. Over time, the healing spring became magnified into legend, transformed from health to immortality. Yet even in the myth lies a paradox. Imagine finding the fountain, drinking its waters, and escaping age. Would it be a blessing or a curse? To live forever while all else withers could mean endless loneliness. To remain young while the world changes around you could become unbearable. Myths often carry warnings hidden within desires. The Fountain of Youth tempts, but it also questions, should mortality be conquered, or is it the very thing that gives life meaning? Without endings, beginnings lose their power. Without age, youth itself would not exist. Still, the fountain remains vivid in imagination. Artists paint it as a lush paradise. Waters sparkling under the sun, pilgrims kneeling to drink. Writers use it as metaphor for renewal of spirit, for rebirth after despair. Even now, modern science chases its reflection. Genetic research, stem cell therapies, anti-aging medicine, all echo the same dream: to push back death, to extend youth, to capture eternity in the body. We may no longer sail across oceans searching for a magical spring, but we still search, in labs and in medicine, in diets and in rituals, for the same thing. The myth endures because the desire endures. And perhaps the fountain has always existed, but not where we expect. Not in the forests of Florida, not in hidden mountains or forgotten islands. Perhaps it is in the small renewals of everyday life, in sleep that restores the mind, in love that revives the spirit, in memory that keeps the dead alive within us. Perhaps the Fountain of Youth was never meant to be found in geography, but in experience. Myths often disguise truths in metaphor, and the truth here may be simple. Life renews itself in countless ways, and we only fail to see it when we search too far. As you drift into thought, imagine yourself finding it at last. A pool of water, clear and still, surrounded by greenery in the middle of the world. You kneel, scoop the water into your hands, and drink. It is cool, sweet, and for a moment, time itself pauses. You feel younger, lighter, whole, but then you realize, the fountain has always been here, not outside you but within you, in the resilience of body and spirit, in the eternal cycles of nature. The Fountain of Youth is both a dream and a truth, impossible and undeniable. Across countless cultures, there are stories of people who are not bound by their own bodies, who slip from skin to skin like clothing, changing shape, becoming beast, bird, or something stranger still. In Europe, they are shapeshifters, men who become wolves, witches who become cats, spirits that glide between forms. In Native American traditions, the darkest of these figures are called skinwalkers, witches who wear the skins of animals and take their shapes at will, moving through the night as owls, coyotes, or wolves. The myths may seem like superstition, born of fear of the dark, but the universality of shapeshifting suggests something deeper. Perhaps the idea that identity itself is not fixed, that self can dissolve, that beneath the surface, we are all capable of becoming something else. The Navajo tell stories of skinwalkers as witches, who violate sacred laws. To become one is to commit the ultimate taboo, often through acts of violence against family. Once transformed, the skinwalker gains power but loses humanity, cursed to wander in secrecy, hiding by day, haunting by night. People speak of them as shadows that run faster than animals, as voices that mimic human cries, as figures that appear at the edge of vision. Some tales say they knock on doors, scratching, whispering, waiting for fear to open the way. Unlike simple shapeshifters of European lore, skinwalkers embody dread. They are not magical curiosities. They are nightmares clothed in flesh. But shapeshifting is not only a Navajo myth. In Norse legend, warriors called berserkers were said to take on the strength of bears or wolves, entering battle in frenzied states where they felt no pain, fought with unnatural ferocity, and seemed more beast than man. In Greek mythology, Proteus, the sea god, constantly shifted his form to evade capture, becoming fire, water, serpent, or lion. In West African stories, witches transform into leopards. In Japan, fox spirits known as kitsune take human shape, sometimes to deceive, sometimes to protect. The pattern repeats endlessly across oceans and centuries. Humans imagine beings who slip the boundaries of form. Why does this myth persist? Perhaps because transformation is already part of us. We change as we age, as we love, as we grieve. A person in rage is not the same as a person in peace. A mother is not the same as a child she once was. Identities shift, roles change, masks are worn and removed. The myth of shapeshifters externalizes this truth, making visible what we feel within, that we are not fixed beings, but fluid, constantly becoming something else. The Skinwalker is the nightmare version of this truth, a warning that transformation without restraint can lead to monstrosity. Anthropologists suggest Skinwalker stories may also have served as social control. In Navajo culture, secrecy surrounds the subject even today. To speak too much of them is taboo, as if naming them invites them near. In this silence, the myth grows stronger. By framing evil as transformation, communities reinforced moral boundaries. Do not stray too far, do not violate sacred laws, or you risk becoming the very thing you fear. In this way, shapeshifter myths are less about monsters and more about morality. They tell us that identity is fragile, and that choices can warp it into something unrecognizable. But shapeshifting also represents freedom. To slip into another body is to escape limitations, to see the world through new senses. Imagine flying as a bird, running as a wolf, slipping unnoticed as a shadow. Such powers seduce, because they promise liberation from the human form, from gravity, from vulnerability. Myths of shapeshifters persist, because they embody both our fears and our fantasies. We fear losing ourselves, but we also long to become more than we are. Science has its own shadows of this myth. Neurological disorders sometimes cause people to believe they are animals, a condition called clinical lycanthropy. Hallucinations, seizures, and altered brain chemistry can shift self-perception so completely that identity feels fluid, unstable. Dreams too are shapeshifter realms in sleep. We become others, our bodies shifting, our forms dissolving without resistance. The myth of shapeshifters may be rooted not in external monsters, but in the strange mutability of the human mind. The paradox of the shapeshifter is that it is both danger and possibility. To become something else can mean loss of humanity, or transcendence of it. To change shape can mean abandoning who you are, or discovering who you truly are beneath the masks. Skinwalker tales warn against forbidden transformation, but other myths celebrate it as divine. The line between curse and gift is as thin as a shadow in the dark. As you drift further into thought, imagine the night stretching wide. The desert air is cool, the stars endless. You hear a sound, footsteps, but not human. A coyote passes, but its eyes linger too long, too knowing. An owl cries, but the sound twists strangely, like words almost spoken. Something is out there, moving just beyond sight. Perhaps beast, perhaps human, perhaps both. You feel the shiver of recognition, that identity is never as solid as you think, that boundaries blur, that forms slip, and in that realization, the myth of shapeshifters is no longer fantasy, but reflection. The Skinwalker may never exist in flesh, but it exists in fear, in silence, in the way people lower their voices when speaking of shadows. Shapeshifters may never rise from myth, but they exist in every transformation of self, every mask worn, every role played. Myth survives because it tells us that the human form is not the end of the story. Somewhere between beast and spirit, between dream and waking, we are always becoming. In the misty highlands of Scotland lies a long, dark lake, deep enough to drown cathedrals, quiet enough to feel timeless. Locals call it Loch Ness, and for centuries they have whispered of something beneath its surface, something vast, something ancient, something that should not exist. It rises in the imagination as a shadow, a ripple, a neck breaking the water before vanishing again into silence. To the world, it is the Loch Ness monster, affectionately called Nessie, one of the most enduring mysteries of modern myth. Skeptics call it folklore, a trick of waves, an invention of tourism. Believers swear it is real, pointing to sightings, photos, sonar readings. Between the two lies the paradox of all myths. They survive not because they can be proven, but because they cannot be dismissed. The earliest written mention of a creature in Loch Ness comes from the 7th century biography of Saint Columba, The story tells of a man attacked in the river Ness by a water beast. Columba made the sign of the cross and commanded the creature to retreat, and it fled. For centuries after, stories of strange shapes in the Loch appeared sporadically, passed among locals as tales rather than evidence. It was not until the 20th century that Nessie rose from legend into global fame. In 1933, a couple driving along the Loch reported seeing an enormous animal rolling and plunging on the surface. Newspapers seized the story, and soon sightings multiplied. Then came the famous photograph of 1934, the surgeon's photo, showing what appeared to be a long neck and head emerging from the water. For decades it was treated as proof, until later revealed as a hoax. Yet by then, the myth was too alive to be undone. Loch Ness itself makes the myth believable. It is 23 miles long, one of the deepest lakes in Europe, holding more water than all the lakes of England and Wales combined. Its dark peat-stained waters make visibility nearly impossible. Anything could hide there. Sonar scans have revealed large, unexplained shapes, though none conclusively monstrous. Photos, videos, and eyewitness accounts continue, each adding to the archive of uncertainty. Some show humps, some wakes, some shadows. Each is unclear, but together, they build a mosaic of possibility. The Loch is the perfect stage for mystery, vast enough to hide secrets, murky enough to conceal truth. Skeptics point to ordinary explanations. Waves caused by boats create optical illusions called seiches, long ripples that look like moving bodies. Logs floating in the water can resemble humps. Swimming deer, birds, or otters create fleeting shapes mistaken for monsters. Even seismic activity under the Loch can stir strange disturbances. Human imagination, once primed to expect Nessie, fills in the rest. In this sense, the monster may exist more in perception than in flesh. Yet the persistence of reports suggests that imagination itself is part of the reality. Myths are not disproven by science because they do not rely on proof. They rely on belief. Still, there are theories that try to anchor the myth in biology. Some propose Nessie could be a surviving plesiosaur, a marine reptile thought to have gone extinct with the dinosaurs. Its long neck and flippers match many descriptions. The problem, of course, is that a breeding population would need to exist, and no carcasses or bones have ever been found. Others suggest large eels, which do live in the Loch, could explain sightings. Giant eels, twisting in the water, could easily appear monstrous at a distance. DNA studies of the Loch's waters revealed abundant eel DNA, hinting at an explanation both mundane and mysterious. Still, no single answer satisfies completely. The paradox of Nessie is that she may be less about biology than about longing. Humanity hungers for mystery, for proof that the world is not fully mapped, that something ancient still hides just beyond reach. Nessie is a reminder that wonder endures, that even in an age of satellites and sonar, there are places where the unknown can still live. Whether real or not, the Loch Ness monster is real in the way myths are real. She shapes imagination, identity, even economy. Tourism thrives on her legend. Families gather by the Loch's edge, staring into the mist, hoping for a glimpse. The monster has become as much a part of Scotland as the hills themselves. And there is symbolism here. Water always represents the unconscious, the hidden depths of mind and world. To dream of a monster in the lake is to dream of what lies beneath, what is unseen but never gone. Nessie embodies that archetype, the shadow beneath the surface, sometimes rising, never fully revealed. She is both fear and fascination, both threat and wonder. To search for her is to search for the unknown within ourselves. As you drift deeper, picture the Loch at twilight. The water is still, the mist clings low, and suddenly, a ripple disturbs the surface. A dark shape glides just beneath, its outline enormous, its movement deliberate. For a moment, you glimpse a long neck, a shadow of scales, an eye that glimmers. Then it vanishes, leaving only silence, only water. Was it real? Was it illusion? You cannot know. That is the power of Nessie. She exists in the space between certainty and doubt, between sleep and waking, between myth and truth. The Loch Ness monster may never be proven. But perhaps that is the point. Proof would end the mystery, drain the wonder. The myth survives because it cannot be resolved, because it continues to ripple in imagination like the surface of the Loch itself. Nessie is not just a monster. She is a reminder that the world, despite all our searching, still hides secrets in its depths. Beneath the shining palaces of Crete, legend tells of a maze so vast and so intricate that once entered, none could ever escape. At its center waited a creature both human and beast, the Minotaur, half man, half bull, imprisoned in darkness, fed with the flesh of innocence. The labyrinth and its monstrous inhabitant became one of the most enduring myths of the ancient world. To the Greeks, it was a story of hubris, sacrifice, and triumph. But like many myths, it may be more than invention. Beneath the tale of the Minotaur lies the possibility of real events, real structures, and real fears woven into legend. The story begins with King Minos of Crete. Seeking to prove his right to rule, he prayed to Poseidon for a sign. The sea god sent him a magnificent bull, meant to be sacrificed. But Minos, enamored by its beauty, refused, keeping it for himself. Angered, Poseidon cursed Minos' wife, Persephone, to fall in love with the bull. From this union came the Minotaur, a creature of unnatural birth, neither fully man nor fully beast. Ashamed, Minos ordered the craftsman Daedalus to construct a prison worthy of such monstrosity, the Labyrinth, a structure so cunningly built that even its maker barely escaped. Into this maze the Minotaur was cast, a secret horror hidden from the sun. Every 9 years Athens was forced to send 7 youths and 7 maidens as tribute to Crete, victims for the monster's hunger. This continued until Theseus, son of Aegeus, volunteered to end the cycle, with the help of Ariadne, Minos' daughter, who gave him a thread to trace his way. Theseus entered the labyrinth, slew the Minotaur, and escaped. It is a story of conquest, of light triumphing over darkness, of order defeating chaos. Yet, like all myths that endure, it may have been built upon fragments of truth blurred into symbol. Archaeology provides intriguing clues. In Knossos, on Crete, the sprawling ruins of a palace complex stretch across acres, with over 1,000 interlocking rooms, staircases, and corridors. To ancient eyes, this vast and confusing structure could easily have seemed a labyrinth. Frescoes depict bulls, bull leaping, and ceremonies where humans faced powerful beasts in ritual. The bull was sacred in Minoan culture, a symbol of fertility, power, and divine energy. To outsiders, the rituals may have seemed brutal, their meanings misunderstood, transformed in retelling into the story of a monster hidden underground. The labyrinth may not have been a maze built of stone corridors, but the palace itself, a marvel of complexity, interpreted as one. The Minotaur itself may symbolize more than flesh, half man, half beast. It represents the tension between civilization and animal instinct, between order and chaos. The Greeks often used hybrids to embody what frightened them most. Centaurs, satyrs, gorgons, all blurred human and animal, showing the fragility of human identity. The Minotaur, born of unnatural union, locked away, fed by sacrifice, reflects the fear of what happens when desire defies law, when instinct overwhelms reason. To slay it was not only to kill a beast, but to master the beast within. But perhaps there was more literal truth. Some scholars suggest the story reflects memories of Minoan dominance over Athens. The tribute of youths may symbolize subjugation, not actual sacrifice. Theseus's victory may represent the eventual rise of Athens as a power that overthrew Crete's influence. In this way, the myth is political history retold as allegory, monsters and mazes standing in for empires and wars. Myth once again preserves truth in symbolic form. The paradox of the labyrinth is its dual nature. It is both prison and test. Those sent into it are doomed, yet the clever, the brave, the prepared may find a way through. It embodies life itself, twisting, confusing, filled with dead ends, yet navigable with patience and memory. The thread of Ariadne is the gift of insight, the line of thought that leads us out of chaos. In this sense, the myth survives not only as a tale of heroism, but as metaphor for existence. We are all in labyrinths, seeking paths through uncertainty, haunted by beasts within. Even today, the Minotaur lingers in culture. Artists paint it as tragic, not monstrous, a being cursed by birth, imprisoned by shame. Writers reinterpret the labyrinth as the human mind, filled with turns and secrets, with fear at its core. Psychologists use it as symbol of struggle against inner demons. To face the Minotaur is to face yourself, and to emerge is to find strength. Myth endures because it speaks to the mind as much as to history. As you drift into the labyrinth of thought, imagine walking its corridors. The walls are high, the air damp, the echoes endless. Every turn looks the same. In the distance, a sound hooves striking stone, breath heavy, a low growl reverberating through the maze. You clutch a thread in your hand, trembling, knowing the beast waits at the center. Perhaps you fight it. Perhaps you fear it. Perhaps you pity it. Whatever happens, the maze teaches you that survival requires more than strength. It requires memory, courage, and a thread to guide you home. The labyrinth may never have been real in stone, and the Minotaur may never have lived in flesh, yet both remain real in memory, in metaphor, in the truths they carry. Myths survive, not because they can be proven, but because they remind us of what we are always seeking, a path through confusion, a way to face the monsters of our making, and the courage to find our way out again. In the dark villages of Eastern Europe, when the nights grew long and the winds pressed against wooden shutters, people whispered of the dead who did not stay dead. They spoke of pale figures who rose from graves, who crept through doorways, who drained the life of the living with hunger that never ended. They called them vampires. Long before novels, long before films, the fear was already there, sown into soil and silence. Unlike many myths, the vampire was not always distant or divine. It was terrifyingly close. Your neighbor, your relative, your friend, returned after burial, no longer human but not entirely gone. The origins of vampire lore are as varied as the lands that carried it. In Slavic traditions, those who died violently, unbaptized or cursed were at risk of becoming revenants, restless corpses that wandered at night. Villagers believed they returned to torment family, to drain cattle, to spread disease. In Romania, tales of the Strigoi told of spirits rising from graves, sometimes visible, sometimes invisible, feeding on blood. In Serbia, Bulgaria, Poland and Russia, countless variations appeared, each with their own rituals to identify and destroy the undead. Though the details shifted, the core remained. The grave was not final, and the dead could still harm the living. What gave this myth such power? Part of the answer lies in disease. Before science named bacteria or viruses, sudden plagues were explained through the supernatural. When one villager died, followed by others in quick succession, suspicion turned to the first death. Perhaps the buried had returned, spreading sickness from beyond the grave. Bodies were exhumed, and what people saw only confirmed their fears. Corpses sometimes looked strangely preserved, with blood seeping from mouths, nails appearing longer, skin flushed. Today we know these are natural processes of decomposition, gases bloating the body, gums receding to reveal longer-looking teeth, fluids leaking as pressure builds. To ancient eyes they were proof of feeding, proof of the vampire's thirst. Fear-shaped ritual. Graves were dug up, bodies staked through the heart, decapitated, or burned to ensure they did not rise again. In some regions, stones were placed in mouths, or bodies were buried face down, to prevent them from escaping. Archaeologists still uncover such burials, skeletal remains with iron stakes through chests, skulls separated from spines, bricks wedged between teeth. Each discovery proves the myth was not just story but a belief lived and acted upon. To villagers, the vampire was real enough to demand protection. Myth became law, shaping how the dead themselves were treated. The paradox is that while vampires were feared, they were also strangely familiar. Unlike dragons or giants, they were not distant monsters. They were kin. They were the ones you loved, transformed into something else. This intimacy made them more terrifying. To imagine a stranger attacking is one thing. To imagine your mother or brother returning to feed on you is another. Myths of vampires reveal a truth about grief. The dead never entirely leave us. They linger in memory, in guilt, in unresolved love. The vampire is grief given teeth, the shadow of attachment that refuses to release. As centuries passed, the myth evolved. In the 18th century, reports of vampire epidemics spread through Europe, with officials documenting exhumations and public panic. The Austrian Empire recorded cases of supposed vampires causing outbreaks of fear, where entire communities gathered to burn corpses. These stories spread across borders, fueling fascination. Writers and poets seized upon them, reshaping the peasant fear into Gothic romance. By the 19th century, the vampire had become aristocratic, elegant, immortal, not the bloated corpse of folklore, but a figure like Lord Ruthven or Count Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula crystallized this transformation, turning the village nightmare into a global myth. Yet even in its refined form, the core remained: the undead feeding on the living, the fear of death reversed into hunger. Science has attempted explanations. Some suggest conditions like porphyria, a rare disorder causing sensitivity to sunlight and discolored teeth, may have inspired vampire traits. Others point to rabies, which can cause aggression, fear of light and biting behaviors. Yet, no explanation fully satisfies. The vampire is not only about disease or burial practices, it is about the deeper truth of how humans experience death. We cannot let go easily. We imagine the dead still walking, still desiring, still reaching for us. The vampire myth is not only a warning about danger, it is a reflection of longing that twists into fear. And the myth continues. Even today, stories circulate, sightings whispered, vampire subcultures, thriving in modern cities. Fictional vampires populate novels, films and television, often no longer monsters but symbols of love, seduction and eternal youth. They embody both dread and desire, both curse and wish. Immortality tempts us even as it terrifies us. To drink blood is to consume life itself. To live forever is to escape death, but also to bear its loneliness. The vampire survives because it embodies both extremes, the deepest fear and the deepest desire. As you sink deeper, imagine standing in a village centuries ago. The moon is pale, the air heavy, and the ground trembles as men with torches approach a grave. They dig, unearth, open the coffin. Inside, the body looks fresh, too fresh. A trickle of blood stains its lips. Fear rises, murmurs grow, and then, with hammer and stake, they pierce the chest. A cry seems to echo, not from the corpse, but from within themselves, a release of terror, a restoration of order. The vampire is defeated. Yet, as they walk away, glancing over shoulders, they know the fear remains, for if one could rise, perhaps another will. The vampire may never be found in flesh, but it is real in the way myth is real in graves disturbed, in rituals performed, in stories retold. It is the shadow of death's refusal, the embodiment of grief and fear that the dead are never gone. And so the vampire endures, rising again and again, not from soil but from memory, from imagination, from the human refusal to accept the finality of the grave. Across the forests and market squares of early modern Europe, there was a time when the moon seemed to lean closer, and the line between man and beast thinned to a whisper. Villagers locked doors, clerics muttered prayers, and magistrates sharpened their pens. Witches were hunted, yes, but so were werewolves. Courtrooms filled with testimony about men who prowled on all fours, who wore belts of wolf skin, who smeared themselves with unguents and slipped into fur and fangs. Confessions spilled out, some delirious, some coerced, some eager to match the stories everyone already feared. Between the 15th and 17th centuries, Europe held dozens of werewolf trials, as real to their participants as any murder case, as fatal in their verdicts as any treason. In France, the year 1573 brought the case of Gilles Garnier, a reclusive man near Dole accused of killing children in the fields. Witnesses swore they had seen a wolf upon them. Others said they saw Garnier himself, bloodied, hunched, half-animal in the dusk. He confessed under interrogation to using a salve given by a spirit to become a wolf, then recanted, then confessed again. He was convicted and burned. A few decades later, in Bedburg, Germany, the story of Peter Stump unfurled like a nightmare pamphlet. He was said to have worn a magic girdle that transformed him into a ravenous wolf. He confessed after torture to killing livestock and people alike. His execution in 1589 was public, theatrical, and meant to cauterize a community's terror. Sensational broadsheets carried his story across borders, and with each reprint the monster grew. Not all cases ended with the same script. In Livonia, where the Baltic forests held their own tangled myths, a 1692 trial produced a startling twist. This of Kaltenbrunn, an elderly man, calmly insisted he was indeed a werewolf, but not a servant of the devil. He called himself a hound of God. Werewolves, he said, journeyed in spirit to the other world on holy nights to fight witches and demons who had stolen the season's grain and the village's luck. If they did not win, crops would fail. The court, baffled and offended by this reversal, punished him anyway. Yet his testimony lingers like moonlight on snow. Even within a single myth, there are rival meanings: monster or guardian, curse or calling. Behind the trials were currents of fear, older than any verdict. Europe was a place of famine, plague, and war. Crops failed, wolves came closer to the hedgerows, children disappeared at the margins of fields. When bodies were found torn, teeth marks became a narrative. The community needed a culprit who could absorb shapeless dread. A wolf is one fear, a neighbor who becomes a wolf is a grander terror still, because it says the threat originates inside the circle of trust. Accusations often landed on the isolated. The poor, the odd, myth, under pressure, becomes a net that catches the already vulnerable. Medicine and belief collided in these rooms. Some defendants spoke of spells and belts, others described uncontrollable rages, blackouts, visions of fur on their own hands. Physicians of the period argued over lycanthropia. Was it a melancholic disease that made one imagine wolfhood, or a literal transformation? Later scholars would name clinical lycanthropy, rare but real states in which a mind becomes convinced it is animal. Others point to ergotism, poisoning from mold on rye, causing spasms, hallucinations and terror in whole villages. There were the salves too, brewed with belladonna, henbane datura, plants whose alkaloids can turn dreams into tactile illusions, grant the sensation of flight, weightlessness, fur. If a man stumbles out of such a trance with blood on his hands, animal or human, how simple it is to say he wore a pelt and became a beast. Law followed theology, and theology followed fear. Treatises argued that werewolves were witches by another name, their transformations powered by pacts. Jean Bodin thundered against skeptics, insisting demons made monsters real enough to kill. Johann Weyer, a physician, pleaded for reason, calling many accused witches and werewolves the mentally ill and the misled. The printing press amplified both positions, but panic travels faster than mercy. Trials multiplied when harvests failed, when wolves were seen, when the night felt too long. The body carried the myth into evidence. Scars from old hunts were read as claw marks. Coarse hair on shoulders became wolf pelt. A leather belt was a satanic girdle. A salve in a jar, a passport to fur. Judges asked precise questions. What words were spoken? Which crossroads? What nights? What companions? The answers were shaped by leading questions, by law already in the air, by what the interrogator needed to hear. Confession under torture is a pool that returns whatever image is forced into it. And yet, inside these tragedies, a human truth flickers. The werewolf is the oldest metaphor for rapture and rage, the moment when appetite devours restraint, when a person feels seized by something older than law. In Norse sagas, berserkers wore wolf and bear skins into battle, taking on the animal's strength. In the courts of early modern Europe, that same transformation became criminal heresy. The myth does not change. The culture around it decides whether it crowns the warrior or burns the witch. What makes the werewolf myth so stubborn is its accuracy about the body's doubleness. We are civilized, and we are animal. By day we are contracts, manners, agreements. By night, hunger prowls, grief howls, desire slips the leash. The trials tried to nail this paradox to a stake, to reduce complexity to a crime. But the myth persisted, because it describes an experience no verdict can erase. Sometimes you do not recognize yourself. As you drift further, imagine a timbered hall by candlelight. The magistrate's wig is powdered with dust. The clerk's quill scratches. Outside, winter presses its cold mouth to the windows. The accused is thin, eyes rimmed with sleeplessness, palms stained with some dark salve. He speaks of a belt, of a night wind, of a hunger that felt like being ridden by the moon. Whether he believes it, or says it to end the questions, the words fill the room like frost. A sentence is read. In the square, heat blooms, wood, ash, breath turning to steam. People watch, afraid and consoled. Order has performed itself. But the forest remains, and the wolves will still call. The werewolf trials ended. The statutes faded. The pamphlets yellowed. Yet the myth still walks, gentled into stories, sharpened into thrillers, worn into metaphors. It returns whenever fear needs a face, whenever the animal under the coat shifts. We like to think the world has grown brighter, but the moon is unchanged. And somewhere, not in the woods but in the heart, a low growl reminds you, the beast was never out there. It was always within, asking to be known, asking to be forgiven. In 1929, in the dusty archives of Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, scholars uncovered a fragment of a map drawn centuries earlier. It was the work of Piri Reis, a 16th century Ottoman admiral and cartographer. At first glance, it seemed a marvel of artistry. Careful lines, coastlines etched with precision, notes written in Ottoman Turkish. But then the astonishment deepened. The map, dated 1513, appeared to show the coasts of South America in remarkable detail, long before much of that continent was officially charted. Stranger still, some claimed the map also depicted Antarctica, 3 centuries before its discovery. The Piri Reis Map has since become one of history's strangest artifacts, balanced between scholarship and myth, between cartography and mystery. Who was Piri Reis? Born around 1465, he was both a sailor and a scholar, traveling with fleets across the Mediterranean, studying geography, collecting charts from Arab, Indian, Portuguese, and even Columbus himself. He compiled them into a world map meant to display the expanse of known seas. What makes his 1513 map so extraordinary is its synthesis, fragments from dozens of sources stitched together, knowledge, traded and stolen across empires, turned into a single vision of the world. The Ottomans guarded it as treasure, but eventually it was forgotten, until rediscovery centuries later raised questions no one could easily answer. The first mystery lies in its accuracy. The map shows the western coast of Africa and the eastern coast of South America with striking precision for its time. European explorers had only just begun to trace those outlines, yet Piri's version already captured them with uncanny clarity. How? His own notes say he used 20 charts and 8 mappi mundi, including a map drawn by Columbus. But even then, the level of accuracy seems beyond what scattered reports could produce. Some argue Piri had access to older, now lost charts, ancient sources that preserved knowledge of coastlines from civilizations far before the age of discovery. The second mystery lies at the southern edge of the fragment. Here, some researchers believe, lies a representation of Antarctica, yet drawn not with ice, but as if it were free of its frozen covering. This claim, made famous in the 20th century, electrified imaginations. Could the Ottomans, or their sources, have known of a continent hidden under miles of ice? Could ancient sailors have mapped it thousands of years earlier, before glaciers sealed its coasts? To believers, the map became proof of a lost civilization with advanced knowledge. To skeptics, it was simply an error. The distorted stretching of South America mistaken for Antarctica by modern eyes eager for wonder. Science complicates the myth. Studies of ice sheets show Antarctica has been covered in ice for millions of years, making the idea of pre-glacial maps impossible. But memory need not be literal. What if the map stitched together reports of southern lands glimpsed by explorers, distorted through copying and imagination? Sailors traveling far south may have mistaken icebergs for coastlines, or extended familiar landmasses into unknown space. Maps are not mirrors. They are stories in ink. The Piri Reis Map may be less revelation of lost worlds, and more reflection of how knowledge, rumor, and wonder overlap. Yet even if Antarctica is a misreading, the map remains paradoxical. It proves that the world was far more connected than we imagine. Knowledge flowed across boundaries, exchanged in ports, stolen from libraries, whispered between rivals. An Ottoman admiral drew from Spanish, Portuguese, Arab and older sources, weaving them into one vision. The Piri Reis Map is not only cartography, it is memory, stitched across continents, proof that myths of isolation are false. Long before the modern age, the world was already global, already sharing its secrets. The myth endures because the map feels too precise to be ordinary. To look at it is to feel as if we are glimpsing knowledge older than we admit. Could Phoenician sailors, or forgotten explorers, have crossed the Atlantic? Could fragments of maps have survived through secret manuscripts, handed down until they reached Piri's hands? Each possibility lingers, unanswered. The more we study, the more the map resists resolution, remaining suspended between explanation and enigma. And then there is the symbolic truth. A map is never just lines. It is imagination captured in ink. It says, here is what we know, here is what we guess, here is what we dream. The Piri Reis Map contains all three. Coastlines that existed, coastlines distorted, coastlines imagined. To stare at it is to see how myth and knowledge blur, how every map is a paradox, a representation of reality that is always incomplete, always reaching beyond its own certainty. As you drift deeper into thought, imagine unrolling the parchment. The smell of dust and salt clings to it, as if it has traveled across seas itself. Lines trace familiar lands, then veer into mystery. Marginal notes in faded ink mention strange animals, unknown islands, names half forgotten. At the edge of the map lies a coastline. Was it South America stretched too far? Was it Antarctica centuries early? Or was it something else entirely? A memory of a land no longer visible. The map does not say. It leaves the question open, and in that openness lies its power. The Piri Reis Map is real, but its meaning is myth. It tells us that knowledge is fragile, that fragments can outlast empires, that even in an age of satellites, mystery lingers in ink 5 centuries old. Whether it shows lost civilizations, or only the limits of human perception, it survives because it invites us to wonder, and perhaps that is its truest purpose. Not to reveal the world, but to remind us that the world is always more than we know. In a quiet library, bound in calfskin, lies a book that no one can read. Its pages are filled with flowing script in an unknown language, curves and loops that seem familiar but belong to no alphabet ever identified. Alongside the text are drawings of plants that do not exist, strange bathing women in interconnected pools, astronomical charts with impossible stars. This book is known as the Voynich Manuscript, named after the rare book dealer Wilfrid Voynich, who purchased it in 1912. Since then, scholars, cryptographers and dreamers have tried to decipher it. None have succeeded. The manuscript remains one of history's greatest literary enigmas, a riddle written in ink, an unbroken code, a myth preserved in parchment. Carbon dating places its creation in the early 1400s, in the heart of medieval Europe. Its parchment is real, its pigments genuine, its binding authentic. This is no modern hoax scribbled in imitation. Whoever made it lived 6 centuries ago, painstakingly filling more than 200 pages. Yet the text defies all attempts at translation. It flows like language, with repeated words, rhythms and patterns, as if it obeys grammatical rules. Statistical analysis shows it resembles natural languages more than gibberish, but no one has found its key. It is not Latin, not Greek, not Hebrew, not Arabic, not any known tongue. Some suggest it is a cipher hiding forbidden knowledge. Others think it may be an invented language, a code designed to conceal secrets from all but its author. The illustrations deepen the mystery. Botanical drawings show plants with leaves like none on Earth, roots and stems that seem plausible but unrecognizable. Are they imaginative hybrids, or species lost to time? Astronomical diagrams feature suns, moons and stars, but with zodiac signs strangely altered. And then there are the bathing women, naked figures immersed in green liquid, flowing through tubes and vessels, as if part of some alchemical experiment or ritual of healing. Scholars have tried to link these images to medieval medicine, astrology or alchemy, but none fit perfectly. The book resists classification, as if designed to hover always just beyond comprehension. Over the centuries, countless attempts at decoding have failed. Cryptographers from World War II, experts who cracked Nazi codes, studied the manuscript and admitted defeat. Linguists, computer scientists and artificial intelligence models have all attempted analysis, each proposing theories, none universally accepted. Some claim it is an early form of constructed language, others that it is shorthand for an obscure dialect, others still that it is meaningless, an elaborate hoax, yet the consistency of the script suggests otherwise. Page after page, line after line, the scribe wrote with care, repeating symbols as if conveying meaning, not nonsense. To sustain a hoax across so many folios without error would require genius and obsession. The myth grows because the manuscript feels alive. Each reader believes they are close, that one more clue will unlock it. In the 20th century, theories blossomed. It was written by Roger Bacon, the English philosopher, to conceal scientific discoveries, or by alchemists hiding recipes for immortality, or by heretics concealing forbidden rituals. Some even speculate it is a relic of a lost civilization, its language a remnant of a people erased by time. To skeptics, these are fantasies born of frustration, yet to believers, the book's refusal to yield is proof that it holds truths too dangerous to reveal. The paradox of the Voynich manuscript is that it is both ordinary and extraordinary. At its core, it is simply a book, made with ink, parchment, and pen like countless others of its time. Yet its contents transform it into something singular, a work that resists being placed on any shelf. Every attempt to explain it collapses into wonder. If it is a hoax, it is the most patient hoax ever conceived. If it is a code, it is one that has outlasted every codebreaker. If it is a language, it is one spoken now only by silence. But perhaps the truth is simpler. The manuscript may not contain great secrets or hidden sciences. It may be a personal project of imagination, a world built by one mind, never meant for others to understand. A medieval dreamer, inventing plants, stars, rituals, and words, poured life into a book that became immortal precisely because it was incomprehensible. Meaning is not always in what is said. It can also live in what cannot be deciphered. In that sense, the Voynich manuscript is a mirror. We project into it what we most desire: science, magic, history, immortality. As you drift deeper, imagine turning its pages. The parchment crackles softly, ink faded but still alive. Strange plants twist their roots across margins. Women float in emerald pools. Stars turn in impossible patterns. The script winds like music, familiar and unfamiliar, as if you almost recognize it but never quite can. You lean closer, certain that one more glance will reveal the code, but it slips away again, like a dream upon waking. The book does not want to be solved, it wants to remain, eternal, an unanswered riddle. The Voynich manuscript may never be translated, but perhaps that is why it endures. Myths survive not by clarity, but by mystery. This book is proof that sometimes the greatest power lies not in knowledge revealed, but in knowledge forever withheld. The ocean is a graveyard of ships. Beneath its waves lie wrecks of wood and iron, masts broken, sails tangled, bells silent forever. But sometimes in the mist, sailors tell of ships that do not stay buried. They appear on the horizon, drifting without crew, sails torn yet catching phantom winds, lanterns glowing with no hand to light them. These are the ghost ships, phantoms of the sea that inspire awe and dread. Some may be abandoned vessels carried by currents, but others belong to the realm of myth, their sightings too strange, too persistent to be explained by accident alone. Between storm and silence, they sail forever, reminders that the ocean remembers more than we do. One of the most famous legends is the Flying Dutchman. First recorded in the 17th century, it tells of a Dutch captain who defied a storm off the Cape of Good Hope, swearing he would round the Cape even if it took eternity. He was cursed to sail forever, never reaching port, his ship glowing eerily in the night. Sailors swore they saw it across centuries, a spectral vessel hovering above the waves, a bad omen foretelling disaster. Even into the 20th century, naval officers reported glimpses of the phantom ship, whether illusion of light, mirage, or myth. The Flying Dutchman endures because it captures the essence of the sea itself, majestic, eternal, untamable. But not all ghost ships are legends. Some are chillingly real. In 1872, the Mary Celeste was discovered adrift in the Atlantic, intact and seaworthy, cargo untouched, but with no crew aboard. Food remained on tables, personal belongings lay in place, but the people had vanished. No struggle, no wreckage, no explanation. Theories abound, storms, mutiny, piracy, even sea monsters, but none conclusive. The ship sailed into history not as wreck, but as riddle, a ghost ship without needing to be supernatural. It reminds us that the greatest mysteries do not need specters, only silence, absence, and unanswered questions. Other ships tell similar tales. In 1921, the Carol A. Deering was found grounded off Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. Her crew was gone, her lifeboats missing, but everything else intact. Rumors of piracy, mutiny, or secret smuggling swirled, but nothing was proven. In 1931, the Bachimo, trapped in Arctic ice, was abandoned by her crew, yet she refused to sink. For nearly 40 years, explorers and whalers reported seeing her drifting through the frozen seas, a real ghost ship haunting the north until she finally disappeared. These stories blur the line between fact and legend, reminding us that the ocean does not give up all answers, and that absence itself creates myth. Ghost ships also appear in cultural memory as symbols. To sailors they were warnings, omens of death, storms, or misfortune. To poets and storytellers, they were metaphors of the soul adrift, lost between worlds, unable to find harbor. The sea has always been a mirror of death, and ghost ships sail its surface like funerals that never end. They are reminders of mortality, of journeys cut short, of voices silenced but not gone. To see one is to feel the weight of history pressing against the present, a whisper that we are not alone on the waves. Science offers partial explanations. Mirages, known as Fata Morgana, can make distant ships appear suspended above the sea, distorted into ghostly forms. Fog and refraction create illusions of glowing sails or phantom vessels. Abandoned ships carried by currents can drift for years, stripped of crew but intact enough to seem alive. Yet explanations never fully erase the myth. When sailors glimpse a phantom on the horizon, shimmering and silent, reason falters before awe. Myths survive not because they resist explanation, but because they satisfy deeper needs. The need to believe the sea keeps its dead, the need to imagine what lies beyond death. The paradox of ghost ships is that they are both real and unreal. Abandoned vessels exist. Optical illusions exist. Yet the stories that cling to them belong to dream and dread. A ghost ship is more than wood and water. It is absence turned into presence, loss turned into vision. The ocean is too vast, too indifferent, and so we fill it with symbols. Ghost ships embody the fear that we are never fully in control, that the sea carries not only cargo and men, but memory and myth. As you drift deeper, imagine standing on a deck in fog. The air is damp, the horizon erased, and then faintly you see it. A ship glides silently toward you, its sails ragged, its hull blackened by time. No figures move aboard, yet lanterns glow faintly as if lit by invisible hands. You watch as it passes, so close you could almost reach out. The air grows colder, the sea quieter, and then it vanishes into mist. Was it real? A trick of light? Or a glimpse of eternity sailing past? You may never know, but you will never forget. Ghost ships endure, not because they are proven, but because they remind us of the truth. The ocean always whispers, everything built will eventually sink, but memory floats forever. They are the afterlives of ships, sailing between worlds, carrying not men but myth. And as long as seas exist, and horizons blur into mist, ghost ships will continue their voyage, haunting imagination as much as waters. In the early 19th century, in the quiet farmland of Tennessee, a family claimed their home was besieged by something that could not be seen yet, made its presence known in every terrifying way. It scratched at walls, rattled chains, tugged at blankets, and whispered in the dark. Soon it grew bolder, speaking in a clear voice, mocking, cursing, singing hymns, even predicting the future. Neighbors gathered, ministers visited, politicians came to witness the strange events. All left unsettled, convinced the Bell family's torment was no trick. This was the legend of the Bell Witch, a haunting so vivid that it remains one of America's most famous ghost stories, woven of fear, folklore, and lingering mystery. The story begins in 1817, when John Bell, a prosperous farmer in Adams, Tennessee, encountered a strange animal in his fields. He fired at it, but it vanished. Soon after, noises plagued his home, knocking on walls, scratching beneath floors, sounds of rats gnawing at bedposts, though none were there. Then came the voice, at first faint, then clear, calling itself Kate. It claimed to be a spirit with unfinished business, intent on tormenting the Bell family, especially John himself. Kate's presence escalated from pranks to violence. Betsy Bell, John's daughter, was pinched, slapped, pulled from her bed. Visitors were mocked, their words repeated back in distorted echoes. Yet others claimed the spirit showed kindness, reciting scripture, singing hymns, even saving travelers in need. It was a paradox, tormentor and helper, demon and angel, liar and prophet. The Bell Witch soon became a local phenomenon. Word spread, and crowds gathered to hear the voice that spoke from nowhere. Some swore it revealed secrets no one could have known. Others said it imitated the voices of distant people, or foretold events that later came true. General Andrew Jackson, before becoming president, reportedly visited the Bell farm with his men. Legend says his group was met with invisible forces, horses refusing to move, soldiers struck by unseen blows, until Jackson himself admitted he would rather face the British again than the Bell Witch. Whether the story is fact or embellishment, its persistence shows how deeply the haunting unsettled its witnesses. At the center of the tale lies the death of John Bell. For years, the spirit tormented him relentlessly, cursing him, declaring it would kill him. In 1820, John fell ill, racked with trembling and weakness. On his final day, a vial of strange black liquid was found near his bed. The voice of Kate reportedly laughed, claiming it had poisoned him. At his funeral, mourners said the spirit sang loudly, mocking the ceremony. Whether John died of natural causes or stress-induced illness, the haunting had achieved its dark prophecy. To the community, the curse was fulfilled, and the legend sealed. Skeptics have long sought explanations. Some argue the haunting was a hoax, born of family tensions or local rivalries. Others suggest Betsy Bell, enduring stress and abuse, may have produced poltergeist-like phenomena, a psychological haunting projected into sound and force. Mass hysteria could explain how neighbors, primed by fear, heard voices in the dark. Yet even skeptics admit the consistency and scale of the reports are unusual. For years, multiple witnesses claimed to hear the same voice, responding intelligently, displaying knowledge no one could easily fake. Whether supernatural or psychological, the Bell Witch behaved as something autonomous, something with intention. The paradox of the Bell Witch is its refusal to fit one category. It was not only a ghost, for it spoke too clearly, acted too forcefully. It was not only a demon, for it sometimes sang hymns and offered kindness. It was not only hysteria, for too many unrelated people claimed to experience it. The spirit of Kate seemed to embody contradiction itself, both playful and cruel, both local and cosmic, both hoax and horror. Myths endure when they mirror the complexity of human fear, and the Bell Witch did so perfectly. Even today, the legend haunts Tennessee. The Bell Witch Cave, near the original farm site, draws visitors who claim to hear whispers, footsteps, or see shadows moving where no one stands. Local folklore warns that speaking ill of the witch invites her attention. The tale has become part of the region's identity, retold in books, films, and tours, each version blurring fact and embellishment further. Yet the heart of the story remains unchanged. A family plagued by a voice that would not be silenced, a haunting that seemed to speak for itself. As you drift into the quiet, imagine sitting in that farmhouse at night. The fire burns low, shadows stretch across the walls, then a knock, a whisper, a laugh too close to be imagined. Your name spoken though no one is near, a tug at your blanket, a pressure on your chest, a voice mocking your prayers. Outside, the wind howls across the fields, but inside, something else is moving, something unseen yet undeniable. You cannot prove it. You cannot escape it. All you can do is listen as the voice, playful and cruel, tells you that you are never truly alone. The Bell Witch remains unsolved, hovering between folklore and fact, between ghost story and history. Whether spirit, hoax, or hysteria, it survives because it embodies the paradox of haunting itself. The fear that death does not silence, the dread that something waits in the dark, the suspicion that the unseen knows us better than we know ourselves. And so, the Bell Witch still speaks, if not in the fields of Tennessee, then in the imagination of everyone who hears the story. In the frozen forests of the far north, where winter lasts so long that the sun seems like a forgotten dream, whispers tell of a creature born from hunger, greed, and isolation. The Algonquin peoples spoke of the Wendigo, a spirit of insatiable appetite, a monster that begins as human but is twisted by famine into something no longer recognizable. Gaunt, with skin stretched over bone, eyes burning with hunger, lips chewed away in desperate feasting, it is said the Wendigo wanders endlessly, feeding but never satisfied. Some legends describe it as towering, skeletal, with a heart made of ice. Others call it invisible, a spirit that slips into men's minds, infecting them with hunger until they devour even their own kin. At its core, the Wendigo is less about a monster in the woods than about a terror within the human soul, the horror of hunger so great that morality breaks. The Wendigo myth grew from real winters where food was scarce and survival uncertain. For the Ojibwe, Cree, and other First Nations and Algonquin peoples, famine was not abstract, it was the shadow of every snowstorm, every failed hunt. Communities told stories of the Wendigo to warn against greed and selfishness, to take more than your share, to hoard while others starved, to turn on family in desperation. This was to invite the Wendigo. Some tales say a person who committed cannibalism in winter would transform, their body stretching, their humanity collapsing into icy hunger. Others spoke of possession, where the Wendigo spirit enters the mind, whispering, urging hunger, until resistance collapses. In both forms the lesson was the same: survival must not come at the cost of the soul. The Wendigo's paradox is that it is both metaphor and monster. On one hand, it explains the dangers of famine, the fear of hunger so overwhelming that one might betray community and kin. On the other, it stands as a supernatural being that stalks the woods, leaving tracks too large for men, bones stripped clean, voices that lure hunters deeper into the snow. The Wendigo is not simply myth, it is the embodiment of cultural memory, a story sharpened by centuries of survival in unforgiving landscapes. Colonial records from the 17th to 19th centuries describe supposed cases of Wendigo possession. Jesuit missionaries wrote of native men claiming to feel the hunger spirit growing inside them, begging to be executed before they lost control. In the 1800s, reports emerged of a Cree man named Swift Runner who killed and consumed his family during a harsh winter. He later confessed to being overcome by a Wendigo spirit. He was tried and executed, but to many his crime was proof that the legend was real, that hunger could turn a man into something less than human. Whether one sees this as psychosis, cultural belief, or possession, the Wendigo myth bridged the natural and the supernatural, explaining horrors that had no easy explanation. The figure of the Wendigo also reveals how myth adapts. Some describe it not only as a cannibal spirit, but as a force that grows stronger the more it consumes. Each victim makes it taller, gaunter, more ravenous, yet never satisfied. In this way it becomes a metaphor for greed itself. No matter how much land, food, or wealth one takes, it is never enough. The Wendigo is the eternal consumer, a mirror held up to human excess. Even today, the word Wendigo has been used to describe modern capitalism, environmental destruction, and industries that devour the world's resources without end. The monster of the forest has become a warning about appetites larger than survival. Yet the Wendigo is also deeply local, tied to the silence of snow and the emptiness of winter woods. Imagine walking alone in sub-zero cold, the trees groan under ice, your breath crystallizes into fog. You hear footsteps behind you too heavy for an animal. You see shadows move, elongated, spindly, not quite human. And then the voice. It sounds like someone you love, calling your name. You follow deeper, until the forest swallows you. In this way, the Wendigo legend is not only metaphorical but lived, a survival story wrapped in supernatural dread. Psychologists have even coined the term Wendigo psychosis, a culture-bound syndrome describing the belief that one is turning into a cannibal monster. Although modern researchers debate whether this truly exists or whether it was shaped by colonial misunderstandings, the very idea reveals how powerful the myth became. To believe oneself infected by hunger, to fear your own cravings, is to live at the edge of humanity, where stories and survival intertwine. The endurance of the Wendigo myth shows how stories can carry moral weight across centuries. To the Algonquin, it was a warning against selfishness and greed. To settlers, it was proof of supernatural wilderness. To modern writers, it is a symbol of endless consumption, and yet, at its center, the Wendigo always returns to hunger. The kind of hunger that terrifies because it erases choice. We all must eat. Yet, what happens when eating becomes destruction? What happens when appetite no longer serves life but consumes it? That is the question the Wendigo asks, and no answer is comfortable. As you let your mind drift, imagine the snow falling heavier, the fire dwindling lower. You feel hunger gnaw at your stomach. A sharp pain that will not leave. Your hands tremble. The wind outside howls like a scream, and in the crackle of wood, you hear it, a whisper urging you to eat. Not bread, not roots, but flesh. You resist, but the voice is patient, the hunger unrelenting. The Wendigo waits not only in the forest but within you, a reminder that desperation makes monsters of us all. So the Wendigo endures, both myth and mirror. It is the ghost of winters past, the fear of famine, the embodiment of greed. It is the cannibal spirit that warns us to consume endlessly is to destroy yourself. In its hollow eyes and gnawed lips lies the truth that appetite without restraint is a curse, a hunger that devours not only the body but the soul. And so the tale continues, carried on the wind across snowfields, waiting for anyone who listens to their own hunger too closely. Beneath our feet lies the ground we trust, solid soil, heavy rock, unshakable foundations. We build our homes, our roads, our cities upon it, believing it to be a vast, impenetrable mass that holds us secure. Yet for centuries, whispers have asked a strange question. What if the earth is not solid at all? What if, far below the surface, there is another world, hollow, hidden, alive? The hollow earth theory is one of humanity's most persistent myths, suggesting that vast realms exist inside the planet, complete with oceans, skies, and civilizations unknown to us. While modern science assures us that the Earth is solid, the dream of inner worlds has refused to fade. The roots of the hollow Earth idea stretch back to ancient times. Many cultures spoke of underworlds, realms beneath the surface, where gods, spirits, or ancestors dwelled. The Greeks imagined Hades beneath the crust, a shadowland for the dead. Norse mythology told of Svartalfheim, the domain of the dwarves, hidden deep within the earth. In Hindu traditions, Patala was described as a subterranean world, filled with jeweled palaces and serpentine beings. These stories were not literal geology, yet they revealed a human instinct to imagine mysteries below, a mirror of the sky above. In the 17th century, however, the idea began to shift from myth to science. The astronomer Edmund Halley, the same Halley of Halley's Comet, proposed in 1692 that the Earth might consist of concentric shells, one within another, like a Russian doll. He imagined vast hollow spaces inside, glowing with an inner light, perhaps even supporting life. To Halley, this could explain the strange variations in Earth's magnetic field. Though later disproven, his suggestion gave new fuel to the idea that the Earth might not be solid after all. By the 18th and 19th centuries, hollow Earth theory had blossomed into wild speculation. Some believed polar openings at the North and South poles were gateways to the inner world. Explorers claimed that warm winds and migrating animals suggested hidden lands beyond the ice. A few even argued that entire civilizations thrived below, unseen by the surface world. Writers and occultists spun tales of Agartha or Shambhala, legendary subterranean cities filled with advanced beings and secret wisdom. For seekers disillusioned with the surface world, the Hollow Earth became a sanctuary for dreams of utopia. The most famous tale of all emerged in the early 19th century with the American Army officer John Cleves Simms Jr. He declared that the Earth was hollow, with giant openings at both poles leading inside. He campaigned tirelessly for expeditions, publishing pamphlets and rallying followers. Though ridiculed by mainstream science, his ideas caught public imagination. Maps were drawn showing polar holes, and stories spread of hidden continents lit by inner suns. Though Simms never proved his theory, he gave the Hollow Earth its modern shape, a place of wonder just out of reach. Literature soon embraced the myth. Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth imagined explorers descending into volcanic tubes to discover prehistoric worlds beneath the crust. Edgar Rice Burroughs, creator of Tarzan, wrote of Pellucidar, a vast inner realm where dinosaurs roamed and humans battled for survival under a perpetual inner sun. These fictional worlds made the Hollow Earth more than a theory. They made it a stage for adventure, survival, and discovery. For readers, the thought that below their feet could lie another reality was intoxicating. But myths do not survive on fantasy alone. Some explorers in the early 20th century claimed evidence. Admiral Richard Byrd, famed polar aviator, was rumored to have flown into a vast opening at the North Pole in 1947, glimpsing lush green valleys and mysterious beings. While historians argue these accounts are fabrications or misinterpretations, conspiracy theories have flourished, insisting that governments cover up the truth of inner worlds. Even now, some fringe believers argue that UFOs are not from distant galaxies but from subterranean civilizations within the Earth. Psychologically, the Hollow Earth reveals something about human imagination. The sky above inspires awe, but it is distant, unreachable. The Earth below, however, is immediate. We stand on it daily, we dig into it, we sense its weight, to imagine it. Hollow is to wonder if reality itself is less solid than it seems. What if beneath the ground we trust lies not stone, but another sky? What if our world is only the shell of something larger? In this way, the Hollow Earth is both myth and metaphor, a reflection of our suspicion that there is always more than meets the eye. From a scientific standpoint, the Earth is not hollow. Seismic waves from earthquakes travel through the planet, revealing its dense layers, crust, mantle, molten outer core, solid, inner core. The physics of gravity would collapse a hollow planet. Yet the fact that science has closed the case has not killed the dream. Hollow Earth stories still circulate in novels, games, films, and online theories. For some, it is a cosmic conspiracy, proof that reality is stranger than we are told. For others, it is simply a poetic possibility that mystery might still lie below. And perhaps in a way, the Hollow Earth is real, not as geology, but as psyche. Every human mind contains its own hollow places, hidden chambers, forgotten memories, unexplored depths. We live on the surface of ourselves, rarely digging deeper. The myth of Hollow Earth reminds us of these inner landscapes, vast and strange, waiting to be entered. Just as ancient people imagined underworlds for spirits, we might imagine our subconscious as an inner realm, complete with its own weather, its own light, its own civilizations of thought. As you drift towards sleep, imagine walking across snowfields at the edge of the world. The ice cracks beneath your feet. Ahead lies a dark opening, vast and silent, leading down into the earth. You step inside, and the air warms, filled with scents of unseen flowers. A glow spreads above you, not from the sun, but from an inner sky. Mountains rise, rivers flow, forests stretch into distance. You realize that another Earth has always existed, beneath the one you knew. The Hollow Earth, part myth, part dream, becomes not just a place beneath your feet, but a world inside your mind, endless, waiting. In the dense jungles of Costa Rica, half buried in the earth and surrounded by creeping vines, lie hundreds of mysterious stone spheres, perfectly round, eerily smooth, some as small as a fist, others weighing more than 15 tons. They appear as if placed deliberately, scattered across fields, villages, and riversides. Their presence raises a question that has haunted explorers, archaeologists, and dreamers alike. Who made them, and why? The spheres, known locally as Las Bolas, are one of the most enduring enigmas of the ancient world, mythic objects that blur the line between art, ritual, and impossibility. The first modern accounts of the spheres surfaced in the 1930s, when workers clearing the jungle for banana plantations stumbled across them. At first, they seemed like natural stones, but their uncanny roundness set them apart. Bulldozers shoved them aside, dynamite cracked a few open, and some were carted away to decorate gardens or government buildings. Yet the more spheres that emerged, the greater the sense of mystery. They were not scattered randomly. Many appeared in clusters, arranged in lines, triangles, or circles, as though mapping something beyond human eyes. Archaeologists soon connected the spheres to the Diquís culture, an ancient civilization that thrived in southern Costa Rica before the Spanish conquest. Between 600 and 1500 CE, the Diquís carved and placed these spheres across their settlements, but the how and the why remains unsolved. The granite used in many of the spheres came from quarries miles away, requiring enormous effort to transport. The polishing was flawless, with precision far beyond simple tools. How did a pre-Columbian society without metal chisels or wheels achieve such perfection? Even with today's technology, crafting giant stones into near-perfect spheres is a daunting task. Theories about their purpose range from the practical to the fantastical. Some suggest they were symbols of social power, crafted to show status among chiefs or families. Others believe they mark ceremonial spaces or aligned with constellations, serving as a kind of celestial calendar. In local legend, the spheres were said to contain gold hidden by the gods, a belief that led to their destruction when looters split them open. And in the minds of more imaginative thinkers, they were evidence of something stranger still, knowledge lost, or contact with civilizations unknown. The mythic aura of the spheres grew when it was noticed that many alignments seemed astronomical. Could the Diquís have mapped the heavens in stone, just as other cultures did with pyramids or standing stones? Some researchers argue the spheres pointed to solstices or the movements of stars. Others see them as representations of planets, arranged in miniature to mirror the solar system. These ideas remain speculative, but they reveal the hunger to see in the spheres something beyond mere ornamentation, an encoded wisdom hidden in stone. Mythmakers have woven the spheres into larger narratives. Some tie them to Atlantis, suggesting survivors of a lost civilization brought the knowledge of perfect geometry to the New World. Others claim they were navigational markers for ancient seafarers who crossed the oceans long before Columbus. UFO enthusiasts imagine the spheres as landing beacons, left behind for extraterrestrial visitors. Though archaeologists dismiss these ideas, their popularity shows how deeply the spheres spark the imagination. Objects so perfect, so alien to their time, invite extraordinary explanations. But perhaps the greatest mystery lies in their destruction. Of the estimated thousands of spheres once scattered across Costa Rica, many are gone. Some were broken, some lost to construction, others removed without record. Today, only a fraction survive, many relocated to museums or parks, far from their original sites. Without their natural context, their meaning grows harder to interpret. They become floating artifacts, untethered from the culture that created them. This loss feeds the myth. When context is gone, imagination fills the space. The surviving spheres, however, still exert their silent pull. Standing before one, you cannot help but feel the weight of intention. These were not accidents of geology. They were shaped, transported, placed. Someone, centuries ago, poured effort and meaning into them. Yet the purpose remains sealed, like a story told in a language we no longer understand. That tension between human hands and unknown intent is what makes them mythic. On a psychological level, the spheres symbolize perfection. A sphere is both infinite and contained, smooth with no edges, no beginning or end. It reflects the universe itself, complete yet unknowable. For the Diquís, perhaps the spheres embodied the cosmos, the divine order of life and death. For us, they embody the mystery of the past, the certainty that people before us knew and created things we still cannot fully explain. In their silence, the spheres remind us how fragile human knowledge is, and how easily meaning can vanish. To walk among them today is like stepping into a dream. Imagine a clearing in the jungle, moonlight spilling across grass. Dozens of spheres sit in quiet arrangement, like planets frozen mid-orbit. The air hums with insects, the trees whisper, and the stones glow faintly in the night. You sense they are not random, they are waiting. They point to something unseen, a pattern too vast for your waking mind. And in that moment, the line between myth and reality fades. The spheres are both artifacts and riddles, both remnants of history and whispers of eternity. So the stone spheres of Costa Rica endure, not just as objects of stone, but as symbols of the unknown. They remind us that even in a world mapped, measured, and studied, mysteries remain. Beneath the rational surface lies a deeper truth, that humans have always created wonders, and that wonder itself is a kind of truth. Whether they aligned stars, marked rituals, or stood as cosmic metaphors, the spheres invite us to look closer, to question, to dream, and perhaps that is their real purpose, not to answer, but to keep the questions alive. In the winter of 1855, the people of Devon, a quiet county in the south of England, awoke to a mystery that has never been explained. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, blanketing the fields, lanes, and rooftops in a stillness that should have been pure. Yet when morning came, the snow was marred by tracks, strange, narrow, hoof-like imprints that stretched in an unbroken line across the countryside. They were not the footsteps of men, nor the paw prints of animals. They seemed cloven, like those of a goat, but far too uniform, too deliberate. And what made them unsettling was their path. The tracks went over walls, across rooftops, and even through locked gardens, as though whatever had made them had walked with supernatural ease. The people whispered of the devil. It seemed the only explanation. Hoofprints in the snow, striding where no ordinary creature could walk. It fit too perfectly into the old tales of Satan roaming the earth. Some villagers prayed. Others nailed crosses to their doors. The local papers reported on the phenomenon, noting that the tracks stretched for nearly 100 miles, crossing rivers and farmland in impossible straight lines. It was as if something had marched relentlessly through the night, leaving behind only its mark. To stand in that moment, you must imagine the hush of snow still heavy in the air, the pale morning light casting shadows across white fields. Then, to look down and see those prints, neat, sharp, and endless, must have sent a coldness deeper than the winter itself. Children were warned to stay indoors. Farmers checked their animals for signs of disturbance. The landscape had become a puzzle no one could solve, and the puzzle had a name etched into it: the devil's footprints. Explanations soon began to circulate. Some claimed the prints were left by an escaped kangaroo from a traveling menagerie, though none were reported missing. Others suggested badgers or donkeys, though the tracks were too narrow, too precise, and covered too much impossible terrain. A few skeptics believed it was a hoax, perhaps men carving shapes into the snow, but no group of pranksters could have covered so many miles in a single night, and no human could walk across rooftops and walls in a perfectly continuous line. The most curious detail was the scale of the tracks. Each imprint was about 4 inches long, spaced nearly 8 to 16 inches apart. The line was too narrow for a large animal, too regular for chaos. In places, the prints cut through snowdrifts, as though pressed with invisible weight. In others, they stopped at obstacles only to reappear on the other side, as if the creature had leapt or vanished through thin air. For a people steeped in folklore, it was impossible not to believe the supernatural had touched their land. The footprints of Devon did not remain contained to one village. Reports came from dozens of towns and hamlets, each with the same story. The prints appeared overnight, stretched across miles, and disappeared without explanation. Some said they saw them leading into caves or circling churches, as though mocking the holy ground. The church, for its part, did not officially recognize the incident, but priests used it in sermons as a warning of sin and evil. In the minds of many, the devil had walked among them, leaving proof in the snow. But if it was not the devil, then what was it? Natural explanations, even now, remain unsatisfying. Some researchers suggest a weather phenomenon, ice falling from the sky and bouncing in strange patterns. Others think of hopping rodents or birds whose prints became distorted in the snow. But none of these accounts explain the scale, the distance, or the eerie uniformity. The mystery resists closure, which is precisely why it has lingered for over a century and a half. As with many myths, the story grew in the retelling. The prints became larger, the distance longer, the fear sharper. Over time, the legend of the devil's footprints took root, not just in Devon, but in the collective imagination. They became a metaphor for the unknown, the idea that something beyond human explanation can intrude upon daily life without warning, leaving only fragments of its passage. Psychologically, the footprints embody the unease of the human mind when confronted with patterns it cannot solve. We crave reason, order, an explanation that ties the world neatly together. Yet, when evidence defies reason, the mind turns to myth. A cloven hoof is not just a shape, it is a symbol, one that has haunted humans for centuries. In the snow it became a mirror for fear itself, sharp, clean, and endless. Imagine yourself walking through those fields of Devon, in 1855. The snow crunches underfoot, and the air bites at your skin. All around you is silence, except for the sound of your own breath. Then you see them, the tracks, stretching into the distance. You follow though, your stomach tightens with dread. The prints climb over a wall where no creature should walk, continue across the roof of a barn, then descend the other side without pause. They seem to pull you onward, into the unknown. You realize you are not just seeing marks in the snow, you are seeing the residue of something that does not belong in your world. That is the power of the devil's footprints. They endure not because we know what caused them, but because we don't. They remain suspended in the gap between evidence and explanation, where imagination thrives, and so they have passed into legend, a tale whispered by firelight, retold in books and lectures, lingering like the prints themselves, striding across centuries, unbroken, impossible. The Hope Diamond is one of the most famous jewels in the world, dazzling in its deep blue brilliance, mesmerizing to all who gaze upon it. But behind that shimmer lies a shadow, a reputation for misfortune, a curse said to haunt anyone who dares to possess it. It is not just a gemstone, it is a story of tragedy, obsession, and the strange magnetism of objects that seem to carry more than beauty within them. The diamond is a myth, and yet it is real, and perhaps in the gap between those two truths lies the reason for its terrifying legend. The story begins, as many do, in the ancient world. According to one tale, the gem was stolen from the eye of a statue of a Hindu goddess. By removing it from its sacred place, the thief invited divine wrath, and thus the diamond became cursed. The stone eventually made its way into European hands, passing from merchant to monarch, leaving behind whispers of ruin. Each new owner seemed to stumble into disaster, bankruptcy, betrayal, imprisonment, or death. The diamond sparkled with beauty, but carried misfortune like an invisible weight. One of its earliest known owners in Europe was Jean-Baptiste Tavernier, a French gem merchant. He supposedly obtained the stone in India and brought it to France in the 17th century. Soon after, he met his end in poverty, abandoned and ruined. King Louis XIV acquired the jewel next, having it cut and set into his collection. Yet the Sun King himself died in misery, and many members of his court who touched or wore the diamond suffered untimely deaths. When Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette inherited the gem, their fates ended at the guillotine. The diamond glittered among royal wealth, but its glow was followed by blood. The stone passed through many hands, each with its own misfortune. Wealthy aristocrats went bankrupt. Prominent figures died violently. A Turkish sultan who owned it was dethroned and murdered. The trail of suffering reads like a list of warnings carved into history. Beware beauty, for it may cost you everything. By the time the diamond arrived in America in the early 20th century, its reputation as cursed had already hardened into legend. The most famous modern owner was Evelyn Walsh McLean, a socialite who adored jewels. She wore the Hope Diamond often, flaunting it at parties and gatherings, treating it as a symbol of glamour, yet tragedy seemed to stalk her. Her daughter died young, her son was killed in a car accident, and her husband descended into madness and ruin. Even her wealth could not protect her from despair. Evelyn loved the stone, but the curse did not love her back. After her death, the Hope Diamond was sold to pay debts. Eventually it was donated to the Smithsonian Institution, where it rests today behind glass, admired by millions. Its reputation as cursed continues, but those who guard it now insist there is nothing supernatural about it. To them, the diamond is simply a gem, a piece of crystallized carbon shaped by earth and time. Yet the visitors who press their faces to the glass do not just see a jewel, they see a story. They feel the weight of centuries of misfortune, passed from hand to hand like an invisible thread woven through lives. Why do we believe in cursed objects? Partly, it is human nature. When tragedy strikes repeatedly in connection with the same item, the mind seeks patterns. A jewel that shines so brightly, yet seems to leave sorrow in its wake, becomes irresistible to the imagination. It is easier to think of it as cursed than to accept that coincidence and human weakness can lead to ruin. The Hope Diamond becomes a vessel for fear, a mirror for the fragility of fortune. And perhaps there is another truth hidden beneath the myth. Gems are born deep within the earth, formed under pressure, carried upward by forces we barely understand. They are older than history, older than language. When we touch them, we are touching time itself. Is it so impossible to believe that some essence lingers in them? Memory, power, a residue of meaning. If human lives can imprint themselves on places, on objects, why not on jewels? The Hope Diamond has passed through hands marked by ambition, greed, love, and despair. Maybe it has absorbed those energies, radiating them back in ways we cannot measure. Imagine yourself standing before the diamond today, in the Smithsonian, the glass shining between you and its dark fire. The room hums with the whispers of tourists, the faint echo of footsteps. You look at the gem, and it looks back at you, its facets gleaming with cold, eternal light. You remember the stories: kings ruined, queens beheaded, children lost, families destroyed. You feel a shiver, not because of what the stone is, but because of what it means. It is proof of our hunger for stories, our need to see meaning in beauty, and our fear of the price beauty may demand. The Hope Diamond may not be cursed in any supernatural sense, but it is cursed in another way. It carries with it the endless weight of human imagination, binding its brilliance to tragedy, making it impossible to see without thinking of death. And so, even behind glass, it remains dangerous, not to your body perhaps, but to your mind. For once you know the stories, you can never look at it as just a jewel again. High in the frozen vastness of the Himalayas, where the air thins and the snow never fully melts, whispers linger about a creature that should not exist yet, refuses to leave human imagination. The Yeti, the abominable snowman, is more than just a myth of fur and footprints. It is a story born of mountains, of survival, of the human longing to know whether we are truly alone in the wilderness. To hear the legend of the Yeti is to walk into the icy silence of a world untouched, where each shadow in the snow could hide something alive, something ancient, something waiting. For centuries, the Sherpa people and other Himalayan communities have spoken of the Yeti as part of their cultural memory. To them, the creature is not a cartoonish monster, but a sacred presence. Some describe it as a guardian of the mountains, others as a dangerous force that must be respected. Stories pass down of enormous footprints found in fresh snow, of silhouettes glimpsed against ridges, of strange cries echoing across frozen valleys. The Yeti was woven into religion, mythology, and survival, a reminder that the mountains themselves are alive and must be honored. The Western world first encountered the Yeti in the 19th and early 20th centuries, when explorers began climbing the Himalayas. Tales of large footprints astonished the outside world, and soon the abominable snowman became headline news. Climbers on expeditions to Mount Everest reported stumbling across tracks far too large for humans, pressed deep into the snow. To the explorers, the Yeti represented something primal and thrilling, proof that the unknown still existed at the edge of the map. Newspapers devoured the stories, artists painted wild illustrations, and suddenly the Yeti was no longer just a Himalayan spirit, it was an international legend. But the mystery deepened with physical evidence. In monasteries, explorers were shown supposed Yeti relics, scalps made of coarse fur, mummified hands, bones said to belong to the beast. Some scientists dismissed these as fakes or misidentified animal parts, but others argued they pointed to an unknown species. In the mid-20th century, several expeditions carried back plaster casts of massive footprints. To skeptics, they could be snow distortions, but to believers they were proof that something walked those peaks. The fascination was not only about evidence, but about what the Yeti symbolized. The Himalayas are among the harshest environments on Earth, cold, unpredictable, often deadly. To imagine a creature surviving there so effortlessly was both terrifying and inspiring. Climbers would risk their lives to conquer mountains, while the Yeti was said to live there, unseen, unchallenged. It was a master of survival, an embodiment of nature's indifference to human struggle. Science, of course, sought explanations. Some claimed the Yeti was nothing more than misidentified animals, large bears, langurs, or wolves. In recent years, DNA testing of supposed Yeti hair samples often revealed they belonged to Himalayan brown bears or Tibetan blue bears. Yet, as with all myths, the explanations did not fully erase the power of the story. Each new photograph of footprints, each blurry video, each witness account renewed the sense that something more might be out there. Beyond the physical, the Yeti's myth carries a deeper, almost spiritual truth. The Himalayas are places of pilgrimage, where monks seek enlightenment, where hermits vanish into caves, to meditate for decades. To live among such vastness is to be constantly reminded of one's smallness. The Yeti, in this sense, becomes more than an animal. It becomes a mirror of the mountains themselves. Powerful, hidden, eternal. It embodies the mystery of wilderness, the unknowable silence that humbles every climber and wanderer who steps onto the snowy ridges. Picture yourself now on a Himalayan trail, the cold biting your face, the crunch of boots sinking into snow. The peaks tower above like frozen cathedrals, their silence deeper than any temple. Then you see it, faint but unmistakable, a footprint pressed into the snow, twice the size of your own. You kneel, trace its outline with your glove, and a shiver travels through you. It could be just ice shifting, or the track of a bear, but in that moment, your imagination stirs. You glance toward the ridges, wondering if something watches you from the shadows. The Yeti may never be proven real in the scientific sense. Yet, in another sense, it has always been real. It exists in the stories of the Sherpa, in the reverence of monks, in the thrill of climbers who find strange tracks, in the fear and wonder that fill the hearts of those who walk the high snows. Its reality lies not in flesh and bone, but in presence. The Himalayas without the Yeti would feel smaller, less mysterious, less alive. And perhaps that is why the legend endures. Myths often survive not because they are true, but because we need them to be true. The Yeti gives shape to the unknown, to the part of the wilderness we cannot tame. It reminds us that no matter how many mountains we climb, there will always be secrets waiting beyond the next ridge. It tells us that nature is not conquered, only endured, and that somewhere, in the eternal white silence, mysteries walk beside us. So whether the Yeti is a hidden species, a misidentified bear, or simply a spirit of the mountains, it continues to breathe life into the Himalayas, and as long as travelers leave footprints in the snow, they will keep looking over their shoulders, wondering if another pair of footprints is already following behind. High above the earth, beyond the pull of weather and the scattering of clouds, something lingers in the dark silence of orbit. It has been photographed, tracked, and whispered about for decades. They call it the Black Knight satellite, a mysterious object said to circle our planet in near polar orbit, older than any human technology, older perhaps than human civilization itself. To imagine it is to picture a sentinel, watching us from the cold void, a silent reminder that the sky is not as empty as we once believed. The story began in fragments. In 1899, Nikola Tesla reported receiving strange repeating radio signals while experimenting with wireless transmission. He believed they came from space, possibly intelligent in origin. Decades later, similar signals were reported by amateur radio operators, adding to speculation that something ancient and alien hovered above Earth. By the mid-20th century, when satellites were still new, sightings of an unexplained dark object circling the planet began appearing in military reports and newspapers. It was said to move in a path no known satellite should follow, as though it belonged to an older, unknown design. In 1960, the US Navy reportedly tracked a large object in orbit. Some thought it was a Soviet satellite. Others believed it was unrelated to any known program. Photographs taken during later missions, especially during the early days of NASA's shuttle flights, showed strange, irregular shapes floating above Earth, images that fueled the legend. To believers, this was proof of the Black Knight satellite, a massive, tumbling black object that had circled our planet for thousands of years, unnoticed until our own technology advanced enough to glimpse it. Skeptics, of course, offered explanations. They argued the images were simply space debris, thermal blankets that had drifted loose from spacecraft, or discarded fragments reflecting light oddly. To them, the Black Knight was not an alien artifact, but human junk, misinterpreted and exaggerated. And yet, the myth did not fade, because every explanation seemed to leave gaps, and every new photograph seemed to carry another worldly weight, as if something was truly out there, silently watching. But why call it Black Knight? The name itself evokes medieval imagery, a lone guardian, armored in darkness, standing vigil. The metaphor fits, for the object is said to be not only alien but ancient, possibly older than our recorded history. Some theorists suggest it could be an extraterrestrial probe, left in orbit to observe Earth for millennia. Others argue it could be remnants of a long-lost human civilization, one advanced enough to send objects into space long before ours. The mystery lies not just in the object itself, but in the questions it forces us to ask about our origins and place in the cosmos. Imagine looking up at the night sky. The stars are familiar, the constellations comforting in their predictability, yet somewhere above, moving silently in polar orbit, is an object that should not be there. It does not transmit messages, yet it does not disappear. It has no purpose we can measure, yet it persists. If you could stand on a mountaintop with perfect vision, you might see it drift across the heavens, a dark shape gliding like a shadow among the stars. The Black Knight myth is fueled not only by technology and sightings, but by human psychology. We are drawn to the idea of watchers, of guardians or invaders hidden just beyond sight. For ancient cultures, the stars were alive with gods and omens. For us, in the modern age, the Black Knight embodies that same need to believe that someone or something has always been watching. It transforms the empty silence of orbit into a place filled with purpose and possibility. There are even claims that the object has been here for 13,000 years. Some say it has been sending signals waiting for us to notice. Others believe it has been quietly observing, perhaps cataloguing our wars, our civilizations, our endless climb toward the stars. The number 13,000 is repeated in accounts, though without concrete evidence. Still, it has become part of the legend. The idea of an ancient machine orbiting Earth long before the first pyramid was built, long before the first city was raised. NASA has repeatedly dismissed the story, labeling the photographs as debris or shadows, yet the images remain striking. Jagged, black, alien-looking shapes drifting against the pale curve of Earth. Too strange, too artistic to dismiss entirely. Conspiracy theorists seize on this ambiguity, claiming cover-ups, hidden knowledge, suppressed discoveries. For them, the Black Knight is proof that our world is monitored by forces greater than ourselves. Now imagine this scene in your mind. You are drifting in orbit, Earth a blue jewel below you. You float weightless, tethered to a spacecraft, when suddenly, something moves in the corner of your vision. You turn and see it, a massive dark form. Unlike any satellite you've ever known, it does not glow, it does not blink, it only drifts, slow and unyielding, a silent night in the endless dark. You know in that moment, that humanity is not alone, not in space, not in history, not in the silence between stars. Whether the Black Knight is debris, a lost piece of thermal shielding, or a relic of ancient intelligence, it has achieved what myths are meant to achieve. It has captured imagination. It has given shape to our fear of the unknown, to our hunger for contact, to our suspicion that the sky hides more than it reveals. Perhaps one day we will know the truth. Perhaps when our technology is ready, we will find that the Black Knight is nothing but human trash after all. Or perhaps we will discover that it has been watching us all along, waiting for us to look back. Until then, it remains in orbit, not only around the Earth, but around our thoughts, circling endlessly in the imagination of a species that cannot help but wonder who is out there in the silence, and why they watch us from above. In the humid, shadowed forests of Latin America, where the moonlight struggles to pierce dense foliage, tales persist of a creature so elusive, so strange, that it blurs the line between folklore and reality. The Chupacabra, literally goat-sucker, is said to emerge at night, leaving behind punctured livestock, drained of blood, and communities gripped by terror. To hear the story is to enter a world where superstition, fear, and unexplained events merge, forming a legend that stretches from Puerto Rico to Mexico, from the American Southwest to the far reaches of Central America. First reported in the 1990s, the Chupacabra is described as a reptilian creature, with spines along its back, glowing eyes, and a predatory intelligence that defies ordinary animal behavior. Witnesses claim it moves with uncanny speed, slipping silently between trees and fences, leaving only the signs of its macabre feeding behind. Farmers awaken to find their goats, chickens, or sheep mysteriously drained, the lifeblood gone, the body untouched except for precise puncture wounds. Fear spreads faster than the beast itself, feeding a narrative that has now become deeply embedded in local culture. Yet, the origins of the Chupacabra myth may run deeper than the 1990s reports. In Puerto Rican folklore, there are older stories of night predators, spirits that roam the countryside, punishing carelessness and punishing human hubris. These creatures were not just threats to livestock, they were omens, signs of imbalance, manifestations of a world in which humans are never fully in control. The modern Chupacabra is a contemporary manifestation of these ancient fears, updated with a new blood-draining twist. Scientific investigation, of course, has struggled to separate reality from myth. Some believe the Chupacabra is a species of unknown predator, perhaps a surviving cryptid from a lineage long thought extinct. Others suggest it is a misidentified coyote or dog suffering from mange, its skin diseased, its teeth sharp, giving rise to the terrifying descriptions reported by frightened eyewitnesses. Skeptics argue that mass hysteria amplifies the story, and that media attention spreads fear, creating a self-fulfilling legend in which every mysterious livestock death is attributed to the beast. Yet the phenomenon is more than evidence or absence of evidence. The Chupacabra exists most vividly in human imagination, in the twilight of fear and curiosity. Every strange howl in the night, every livestock death unexplained by predators, every shadow glimpsed in the brush becomes proof for those who are ready to believe. Its power lies in this duality. It is neither fully real nor fully fictional, a creature that inhabits the spaces between perception and myth. The Chupacabra also embodies a deep psychological tension. It represents the anxiety of rural life, the vulnerability of communities dependent on livestock for survival, and the inexplicable cruelty of nature. It is the perfect predator of myth, small enough to elude detection, fast enough to escape capture, terrifying enough to dominate the imagination. To think about it is to confront the unknown in a primal way, the same way early humans feared nocturnal predators, or how island communities feared spirits in the forest. There are countless reported encounters, glowing eyes in the dark, unidentifiable tracks near barns, animals drained of blood, but otherwise untouched. Some say the Chupacabra moves in packs, others insist it is solitary, intelligent, observing its prey carefully before striking. In Mexico, stories describe it as a strange dog-like creature, hairless and menacing, with sharp fangs. In the American Southwest, ranchers recount sightings of a small, almost alien predator, jumping fences and slipping through narrow spaces with an unnatural agility. What makes the Chupacabra compelling is not just its horror, but its persistence. Decades of investigations, photographs, captured DNA, and sightings have failed to definitively explain its existence. Scientists attempt to rationalize, journalists seek sensational stories, locals pass down chilling tales, but the legend refuses to fade. Its mystery has become part of the Americas themselves, a reminder that even in places mapped and studied, the wild still holds secrets, and that human understanding is always limited in the face of nature's strange possibilities. Imagine standing in a moonlit clearing, the air thick with humidity, every sound magnified by the stillness. A rustle in the brush, a shadow flits across the ground. You strain your eyes, hoping it is nothing, but somewhere in that darkness, the Chupacabra may be waiting, patient, silent, assessing. The world of the Chupacabra is not ruled by logic or routine, but by the pulse of instinct, by hunger and survival. It is a predator and a legend entwined, moving between reality and story with uncanny fluidity. Even today, it inspires fear and fascination in equal measure. Cryptozoologists study alleged evidence, folklore scholars examine its narrative roots, and storytellers continue to weave tales around it. The Chupacabra's endurance is a testament to humanity's need to fill gaps in knowledge with wonder, to give shape to the unseen, and to create monsters that embody our own deepest fears. It reminds us that the world, even in its most mundane corners, can harbor mystery, and that in the quiet hours of night, some secrets refuse to remain hidden. Whether a mangy coyote, a supernatural predator, or an unknown species entirely, the Chupacabra exists as long as humans believe in it. Its legend thrives in barns, forests, and imaginations across the Americas, and as long as livestock vanish mysteriously, as long as shadows flicker in moonlight, as long as a strange rustle echoes in the trees, the Chupacabra will endure, a creature that is in every sense both real and myth, a living enigma that refuses to be fully explained or tamed. Far north, in the frozen expanses of Canada's Northwest Territories, lies a place whispered about in hushed tones, a place where time seems to stand still, yet where reality itself may have faltered. Anjikuni, a remote Inuit village, became the center of one of the most chilling mysteries of the 20th century, a village that vanished without trace, leaving behind empty homes, abandoned belongings, and the lingering question of what could have caused such a sudden disappearance. To enter this story is to step into a world where isolation magnifies fear, where the snow itself seems to hold secrets, and where human absence becomes more haunting than presence. It was November 1930, when Joe LaBelle, a fur trapper, approached the village on his way to collect supplies. At first he noticed an unusual silence. The dogs that normally barked and skirmished in the village square were gone, smoke no longer rose from chimneys, and the wind carried a strange emptiness that made the snow-laden landscape seem unnervingly still. As LaBelle moved closer, he realized that the village was completely deserted. Homes stood intact. Food remained in the ovens. Personal belongings were scattered as if their owners had left in haste, but no living soul remained. It was as though the entire population had evaporated into the cold air. The reports that followed were unsettling. None of the villagers could be found, and no tracks led away from the settlement. Food, clothing, and personal effects were untouched. Traps were left in mid-spring, fires were still warm, and even the sled dogs, normally the village's first line of alert, were missing. The eerie emptiness suggested more than a simple migration or natural disaster. It suggested disappearance, absence where presence should have been guaranteed. Local Inuit elders whispered of strange phenomena in the region, spirits that claimed the living, or unexplained forces that swept through settlements without warning. Newspapers picked up the story, spreading it across continents, and investigators arrived to search for explanations. Some proposed natural disasters, an avalanche, a sudden blizzard, or a predatory wolf pack. Yet the village was intact. There were no signs of struggle, no evidence of snowdrifts or other environmental hazards that could account for a complete population vanishing overnight. Skeptics suggested hoaxes or exaggerations, arguing that the tale was fueled by sensationalist media, eager to report the uncanny. But the records, testimonies, and even Labelle's own report painted a consistent and unsettling picture. Anjikuni had disappeared, leaving behind only its frozen echo. The story gained traction in paranormal circles as well. Some claimed extraterrestrial involvement, suggesting that the villagers were abducted by alien forces, taken from their homes as part of a larger, inscrutable plan. Others posited interdimensional theories, that the village slipped through a crack in reality, transported to a space beyond our comprehension. To imagine this is to picture a sudden absence in the world, a gap in the fabric of existence where the mundane homes, belongings, snow remains tangible, yet life itself has been erased. Perhaps what makes the Anjikuni disappearance so haunting is the intimacy of the evidence. Unlike many mysteries, there are no distant reports, no hearsay, no vague rumors. Every home is accessible, every object is tangible, every abandoned sled and frozen fire tells the same story, a life interrupted, a rhythm of existence stopped abruptly. There is no sound, no movement, only the evidence of ordinary life abandoned mid-moment, as if the villagers had stepped out for a task and never returned. Some have speculated about human agency, cults, kidnappers, or secret experiments. Yet the isolation of Anjikuni makes human interference improbable. The harshness of the northern climate, the distance from urban centers, the sheer difficulty of moving hundreds of villages without leaving traces, these factors defy rational explanation. It is as though the disappearance obeyed a logic beyond human comprehension, a force indifferent to reason, motive, or morality. Imagine walking through the village yourself. Snow crunches underfoot, the wind whistles through empty windows, a kettle sits atop a stove, a fire still smoldering. Toys, tools, and clothes lie scattered across the floor. The scene is domestic, ordinary, yet profoundly wrong. You feel eyes upon you, not human eyes, but the gaze of absence itself, the weight of a presence that is no longer there. Every step amplifies the surreal horror, the human world suddenly hollowed, a place where life once existed, now suspended in frozen silence. Even today, Anjikuni remains a symbol of the inexplicable. Anthropologists, paranormal investigators, and storytellers continue to debate what occurred. Was it a natural anomaly, a paranormal event, or a conspiracy buried beneath decades of snow and secrecy? No definitive answer exists. The village endures in maps, photographs, and the collective imagination, a reminder that the world is not entirely governed by rules we can perceive, that some corners of reality remain dark, uncharted, and resistant to understanding. The vanishing village of Anjikuni teaches a subtle, unsettling lesson, that absence can be as powerful as presence, that the spaces left behind after life departs are charged with meaning, and that the ordinary world may conceal extraordinary mysteries just beyond our grasp. Whether you see it as a warning, a legend, or a reminder of the fragile nature of existence, it leaves a lasting impression on the mind, and as you drift to sleep, perhaps you will hear the echo of a village that vanished. Feel the stillness in the air, and imagine a world where life can disappear without trace, leaving only questions, whispers, and the cold, endless snow. Think of the Amazon warrior women, fierce and untamed, their legends shaping the perception of strength, gender, and courage. They haunt jungles and rivers, not because they were simply tales, but because humanity is drawn to the idea that bravery and mystery coexist in worlds we cannot fully enter. King Tut's curse, the Kraken in the deep seas, the hanging gardens of Babylon, and the phoenix rising in eternal fire, all reveal a subtle, hypnotic truth. The universe is rich with stories that transcend ordinary experience, inviting the mind to wander where evidence fades and imagination expands. As you settle deeper into the rhythm of your own thoughts, imagine the world around you folding into a quiet, endless space. The myths you have journeyed through, lost cities swallowed by oceans, dragons buried in the earth, phantoms of vanished villages, are no longer just stories whispered across time. They are echoes, lingering in the folds of reality, challenging the boundaries between what is tangible and what is imagined. In each legend, there is a pulse of truth, a shadow of possibility, a trace that whispers, perhaps the world is far stranger than you believe. Consider Atlantis, resting beneath endless waves, its golden streets hidden beneath the relentless tides, a city of wisdom and mystery that time could not fully erase. Picture El Dorado, shimmering in South America, where gold may have been real, yet the city itself eludes human grasp, leaving explorers to wander and dream, chasing a glimmer that may exist only in the imagination. Giants of old, creatures of myth and lore, remind us that the past was vast, and our understanding of scale, power, and possibility may be limited by the confines of memory and history. Dragon's bones in China, the oracles of Delphi, the Great Flood, the Fountain of Youth, they all exist in that liminal space where human desire meets unexplained phenomena. Shapeshifters, the Loch Ness monster, and the Minotaur Labyrinth, creatures and places that blur the lines between reality and myth, offer the mind an opportunity to dwell in awe. Vampires of Eastern Europe, the werewolf trials, and the mysterious Piri Reis Map hint at histories we cannot fully reconstruct, glimpses of past knowledge lost in time, leaving traces that are tantalizing yet incomplete. The Voynich Manuscript, ghost ships drifting across seas, the Bell Witch haunting, and the stories of the Wendigo are not simply narratives. They are mirrors reflecting our deepest fears and curiosities. Hollow Earth theories, the stone spheres of Costa Rica, the Devil's Footprints of Devon, and the Hope Diamond Curse all remind us that reality is not always as stable as we assume, and that sometimes the most ordinary landscapes harbor extraordinary anomalies. High in the Himalayas, the Yeti leaves its enigmatic footprints, a symbol of nature's uncharted wilderness. Orbiting silently, the Black Knight satellite hints at secrets above our world, while Chupacabra sightings in the Americas tease the possibility of unknown predators lurking in shadows. The vanishing village of Anjikuni, empty yet complete, leaves behind a silence more eloquent than any voice, a reminder that disappearance itself can be profound, but the absence of life can echo louder than its presence. All of these myths, stories, and legends share a common thread. They force us to confront the unknown. They exist in the spaces where certainty falters, where evidence is sparse, where imagination reigns, and where the human mind stretches to fill the void. They are not merely tales of entertainment. They are invitations to explore the boundaries of perception, to question what is real, to wonder whether the universe is governed solely by logic, or if it harbors hidden dimensions beyond comprehension. As you drift closer to the edge of sleep, imagine walking through these worlds one last time. Hear the whispers of vanished villages, feel the cold spray of the ocean where Atlantis rests, sense the watchful eyes of creatures thought long extinct. Let your mind traverse jungles, mountains, and deserts, blending reality with imagination until the line between the known and the unknown dissolves completely. In this space, myths are not merely stories, they are experiences, landscapes of thought, and invitations to explore the impossible. The power of myth lies not in proof, but in the sensation it leaves behind, the thrill of possibility, the gentle shiver of uncertainty, the hypnotic cadence of curiosity. These tales, collected across cultures and centuries, converge in your mind now, offering a gentle meditation on the vastness of what could be. They are guides through the subconscious, through dreams and fears, through imagination unbound, and as you lie still, eyes closed, the world of myths becomes a quiet companion, a soft rhythm against the heartbeat of the night. And now, as the final veil of consciousness settles, allow your mind to rest among the legends, the mysteries, and the impossible truths. Let the quiet hum of the unknown soothe your thoughts. Let the rhythm of myths, their rise and fall, their disappearance and persistence, guide you gently toward a dreamscape where all the worlds you have visited merge into a single, serene, and infinitely mysterious reality. Here, in this space between wakefulness and sleep, all myths might be real, and all stories are yours to inhabit. Perhaps the greatest lesson these myths impart is the awareness of mystery itself. The universe is vast, layered, and often unknowable. In the disappearance of Anjikuni, in the rise of Phoenix from fire, in the lurking shadow of a dragon or Yeti, there is a reminder that certainty is fleeting. Life is interwoven with unknowns, and the beauty of myths lies in their persistence. Despite that uncertainty, they exist not to be fully solved, but to be felt, pondered, and allowed to ripple through consciousness, shaping thought in ways facts alone cannot. As sleep envelops you, imagine these myths unfolding silently, their echoes brushing the edges of your mind, blurring the lines between waking and dreaming. Let them carry you into a world where reality bends, where stories breathe, and where the impossible feels intimate. Let Atlantis rise from the waves, let the fountain of youth sparkle, let Anjikuni's silence fill the night. Drift in this space with the knowledge that myths are not dead. They live in memory, imagination, and the quiet spaces between one thought and the next.